It is 5 o'clock. We are still looking for two directors, waiting on two directors. Kathy, I know, is coming in from work, checking in with Kamara now.
Madam Chair, you do have a quorum if you want to go ahead and get started.
Okay, we are waiting to hear back from Kamara, but we will go ahead and take roll, and hopefully Kamara and Kathy will be joining us shortly. We will start with roll. So Director Barrows.
Here.
Director Smith.
Here.
And I am also here, so we do have quorum, and we'll just make a note when Director Banfield and Director Decker join us. The first item on the agenda is our student representative reports. So we'll go ahead and get started with our representatives from Columbia River. Is it Riley Sharman or Maya Anson, or possibly both?
Hi.
Hi there, welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Dr. Webb, members of the board, cabinet members, and community guests. My name is Maya Anson, and I'm accompanied by Riley Sharman, and we're from Columbia River High School. Our prompt this month was to answer the following questions. With schools in remote learning format, how should students' achievement be measured, and what would a fair student achievement measurement look like? In terms of measuring student achievement, we found the most important factor during these unprecedented times to be an attention to effort rather than perfection. Recognizing a student is doing their best, whatever that may be, and measuring their achievement that way would be more efficient and fair to a student who may be going through a lot during these uncertain times. Next, we found an attention to the student's individual growth to be a fair and efficient method. Instead of comparing a student's knowledge to a strict grading system or to other students, it would be fair to base a student's achievement off of how much they were able to grow and learn throughout the unit and or class. Lastly, we have this concept of allowing students to have opportunity to display their comprehension. What I mean by this is that sometimes test and quiz questions and even homework questions are often not set up to accurately display a student's comprehension of the material. By allowing students to explain their understanding despite their initial wrong answer or incorrect misinterpretation of the question would allow students a fair measurement of achievement and knowledge.
Now, by applying these student achievement measurement systems to online learning, it could drastically affect students' overall well-being. Students being graded on growth and developed understanding would only reinforce motivation for them to keep trying their best, opposed to just taking a standardized test and losing hope. Mental health of students is a ripple effect for how they cooperate in their classes and stay motivated in school. Online resources would be available, such as Zoom counseling sessions, therapy groups, and more hotlines. These resources would lead students to developing more confidence and self-efficiency inside and outside of class. There is no such thing as a perfect system, but a fair system would help result in what the ultimate goal is: students' productivity, academic achievement, and mental health. Students are 20% of our population, but 100% of our future. Our schools must continue to attend to their different needs and develop inclusivity.
Yeah, the giggle.
Thank you. Are you gonna?
Yes, we appreciate your attention this evening. Thank you for your time. Sorry about that. Something fell upstairs.
No, thank you very much for that presentation. Next up, we have Mahala Smith from Fort Vancouver High School.
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Webb, members of the board, cabinet members, and community guests. My name is Michaela Smith, and I'm from Fort Vancouver High School. So measuring success is very hard to do because of the variance of standards, but measurement requires three things: a starting point, an end point, and a unit of measurement. I think that the best way to measure students' academic successes and achievements is by gaining an understanding of their own personal growth. Think about it this way. Let's say you and your colleague were in a foot race, but instead of a finish line, there was a finish time. So go as far as you can within 1 minute. Once the race is finished, they run 200 meters and you run 300 meters. Then the next month you race again, and this time they run 300 meters and you run 400 meters. Even though you ran farther, you both improved by the same amount. That takes the same training and dedication, and the success is in the improvement. Now, instead of a foot race at school, there could be a test in each class that the student takes at the beginning of the semester or unit. Then the student takes the same test at the end. The difference in the scores allows teachers to understand how much they have learned. An improvement would be an increase in one letter grade, or about 10%. However, there are some outliers. If a student scores very highly on the first test, the teacher can cater to that person's needs or put in place a project to express one's understanding in a different way. This allows success to be defined in a way that is unique to each person. Not only will this help the confidence of each student, it allows the teacher to understand what their students need. Our students don't have the same opportunities as most. They're taking care of siblings, working jobs to support their families, and dealing with an intense amount of stress and pressure. Mental health and family issues are at an all-time high. Students are failing classes. School is intimidating, especially when there's not a support system at home. So instead of putting so much emphasis on singular assignments, there's an emphasis on how far the student has come from the beginning. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michaela. I'll just make note that Directors Banfield and Directors Decker have joined us. Thank you. Next up, we have Karen Gallegos from Bay. And please correct me if I mispronounced your name. I apologize.
Oh, no, it's okay. Okay. Good afternoon, Dr. Webb, members of the board, cabinet members, and community guests. My name is Karen Gallegos, and I am from Hudson's Bay High School. This month's prompt questions were: how should students' achievement be measured? And what would a fair student achievement measurement system look like? And these questions are important because they provide discussion about a student's success and performance. A student's achievement should be measured by a student's level of knowledge, skills, and understanding. This is important because having skills can help a student process and identify their goals. Understanding those skills can help build new knowledge. Seeing where a student is when learning can help others understand where they might be confused or can get that help. And feedback can build an opportunity to get things resolved and be better at their work. In a fair student achievement measurement system, objective plays a big role. Being objective means having observations, whether they are positive or negative, and can gain a better understanding from it. The graduation rates are just as important as objective. Graduation rates show the number of students enrolled in an institution who seek and achieve in a degree. Seeing those rates can determine a fair system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up from Skyview, we have Teddy Beavers.
Good evening, Dr. Webb, members of the board, cabinet members, and community guests. My name is Teddy Beaver, and I'm from Skyview High School. I spoke with a number of students about today's prompt on how online school should be measured relative to in-person learning. To begin, should it really be measured any different than normal school? Meaning in the sense that there's a set criteria students need to learn, they should be measured on how well they learn this criteria. I feel, and many students I spoke with felt similarly on this. However, one of the struggles of the online learning format is tech issues for both students and teachers. No matter how well prepared a student or teacher may be, tech issues can distract from learning. Students could get logged out of a Zoom and miss important teaching. Tech failure could cause a gap in learning that would affect performance while testing or demonstrating knowledge. To help combat this, first, teachers should be understanding and lenient on set times for testing. Second, many students emphasize to me the importance of retakes and other ways of showing mastery of a topic, even if it comes later in the unit or semester. I heard from some the frustration of not grasping a topic earlier in the year only to understand it later on, yet still being punished in the grade book for the lack of knowledge prior. In an online learning format especially, failure to have knowledge on a topic in the moment is only emphasized. Finally, participation. Participation versus testing. That is really the root of the conversation when talking about the differences of online school and in-person school, and is how much participation should be affected in the grade. I heard both sides of this conversation from students. Some wanting teachers to be more strict on grading on-time assignments and in-person learning, and others spoke about how teachers should provide more opportunities for learning outside of designated class time. As many students now may work during the day or can't always attend class on time. All being said, it comes down to teachers finding the proper balance. Proper balance in rewarding those maintaining strong participation and knowledge with the subject. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Samantha Duncan from VSAA.
Hi. Good evening, Dr. Webb, members of the board, cabinet members, and community guests. My name is Sammy Duncan, and I'm from VSAA. For this prompt, I'd like to compare the measurement of student achievement pre-online school and during online school. Pre-online, VSAA students worked in different ways to show understanding of topics. Teacher provided several ways to show understanding, such as group projects and presentations, class discussions, papers or essays, and traditional tests. For example, every day in my English class last year, we would respond to a prompt, sometimes about literature or social issues or questions that we had about the book that we were currently reading. After we had finished writing, our teacher would lead us in a discussion, and we would all show what we knew through this discussion with our classmates. Online, it's generally been the same, but with more flexibility due to these uncertain times. This flexibility includes extended due dates for assignments and projects, and different technical methods of sharing assessments, like through Google Drive, Kami, Canvas, or even email. I have found that as we work remotely, teachers are understanding that we are all in different situations, and that while we are not all together in the same classroom, that we're all trying to get the same work done. I'm pretty sure everyone here can agree that taking tests isn't the most fun thing in the world, but the good news is that tests aren't the only way that teachers ask us to show what we know. And through various ways of assessing, I believe that student achievement is being accurately measured, even during remote learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next from iTech, we have Kira Navarro, I believe. Kira Navarro, I believe. The other name on my list was Zev.
That's correct. Zeb is subbing in.
Good evening, Dr. Webb, members of the board, cabinet members, and community guests. My name is Zeb Wolverton, and I am from iTech Preparatory. With schools having a remote learning format, it is difficult for students to succeed in the normal standards. But I've noticed that it helps when instead of being measured by the normal standards, by the original criteria, they can be noticed by things like the student's personal perseverance in progressing to do better, using standard-based grading and teachers' student overrides to reflect standard scores to further enforce students' perseverance, and continued work to improve certain grades. Students have also personally been standing up and working hard under such circumstances. iTech students are usually very adaptive and making do with what is at hand. Starting out in 2 different campuses, then transitioning into one for everyone is a big example like this quarantine. Students at iTech also try their best in each class, and they know they have teachers who will support them. Sorry. Again, this with standard-based grading, Students can miss assignments or score lower, but have a chance to improve throughout the rest of the year when reassessed on the same standards. Our students should have a fair measuring system that should involve with helpful after-school classes. Teachers and students can discuss free times available and meet with multiple teachers or students. This is also the case on Wednesdays, where teachers will have their Zooms open for students to join for social interaction or from help from the teacher. Our ASB and NHS club have joined together to create a tutoring session with students and for any help in classes or specific assignments. This is run by 1+ teachers and students who are ready to help. Teachers will also measure the students' readiness in classes by being flexible to extend due dates so more students can have the chance to submit work. ASB and counselors have teamed up to create anonymous student health surveys to better understand how the students themselves are feeling towards school and stress levels. The information is then checked and then will generally be given to teachers to also better understand how their students are feeling. Finally, standard-based grading. Standardized grading is the grading system at Vancouver High-Tech Preparatory. It will weigh at your latest score on a standard 60%, meaning that students can not necessarily forget about past assignments, but move forward and improve and persevere to achieve the best grade possible. Standard-based grading has helped me personally. Sometimes I'm not perfect. I will score low on a standard. Teachers are often quick to reinforce that it will not be the only time we'd assess that specific standard, making it possible for me to improve standard scores without having the stress of a low score. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lastly, we have from Flex Academy, Lucas Carter and Dominic Pennington.
Good evening, Dr. Webb, members of the board, cabinet, and community guests. My name is Dominic Pennington, and I'm here representing Vancouver Flex Academy. This month's prop questions were, with schools in remote learning format, how should student achievement be measured? What would a fair student achievement measurement system look like? To find a worthwhile solution to the problem, I thought the best place to start would be to understand how student achievement is measured under normal circumstances. So I did some research into the subject. It didn't take long for me to come to understand that we are not the first people to try and answer this question. In fact, far from it. Measurements and scoring aren't an uncommon sight in any learning environment, and there are many ways to go about it when discussing student achievement. While a student's proficiency can be measured with graded coursework, their end result, their grade, doesn't always reflect the effort that they put into the class. Their learning, or at times even their proficiency in the subject, plenty of things can affect a student's learning that are of no fault of the student. With a drastically altered learning environment, many students and their families alike are struggling right now, more so than ever before. Interaction and communication between teachers and students and their families is limited. Important context in learning, like access to technology, connectivity, engagement in learning, food and housing insecurity, and experience with trauma are occurring more frequently, are less likely to be communicated and overall more likely to go unnoticed. A straightforward resource to this problem is to ask. Ask how students are doing emotionally, socially, academically. This might be easier said than done in some classrooms, but it's certainly possible for smaller classrooms, which is a benefit of being at a smaller school. My school, Flex Academy, is proud of what it's doing to improve virtual classroom engagement. Members of the Flex ASB are working on ways to make our Zoom classes feel a little more personal. One way we're doing this is by all turning on our cameras and hoping it encourages other students to do the same. Teachers like our very own Nancy Carey, who teaches graphic design and photography, have offered substitute assignments. These assignments act as a more feasible opportunity for students who are willing to put in the work to demonstrate their learning. They may not guarantee an A in the class, but they can keep a student from failing. Assignments like these are given out based on an individual need and work well because our teachers understand how their students are performing, what material they understand, and where they might need help. While this topic might seem more fitting for an educator to answer, I think it's important and I appreciate the opportunity to share my opinion on the topic. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I want to thank all the student representatives for your presentation. It's always very insightful to hear what our students have to say. Next on the agenda is our citizens comment portion. I will begin with our citizens comment prompt. Citizen comments is the time in our meeting where the board and administrative staff like to hear comments from the public. Because most matters require fact-finding and review, the board is not able to respond to any public comments made at this time. Additionally, the state's Open Public Meetings Act restricts deliberation on topics that have not been placed on the publicly noticed agenda in advance. If follow-up action is necessary, the board will ask the superintendent to work with the administrative staff to consider the information and respond accordingly. Speakers are expected to be respectful. Personnel complaints and personal attacks are not permitted. The board asks that personnel complaints be submitted in writing. Speakers will be promoted to panelists as I call their name. Please state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes to make your comments. If you hear a chime, please conclude your remarks. If you have materials or additional comments you would like the board to review, please submit those to vpsboard.directors@vansd.org. The information will be shared with the superintendent and board. The board appreciates, listens, and cares about the broad range of perspectives in our community, and we thank you in advance for your comments. We do have a long list of community comments tonight, so I am going to keep us limited to the 3 minutes. So I ask you that once you hear the chime that you promptly finish your remarks. And our first community comment is from Steph McDonald.
Hi, my name is Stephanie McDonald.
Go ahead and state your address, please, and then you can get started.
106 West 39th Street, Vancouver, Washington. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for allowing my voice to be heard. I'm a second grade teacher and I've been a teacher for 4 years. And I'm currently the co-VEA union rep for my elementary school. I have experienced distance learning firsthand every day, and this is not what I imagined I would be doing when I became a teacher, but I've adapted to the current situation. And I wanted to celebrate all of the educators, students, and family members who have worked so hard and tirelessly to prioritize their children's education. So often we look at the negatives of distance learning, and yes, we know there are plenty, but I wanted to highlight the positives that I've seen through the year. My students are making academic growth. It might not be as much as it has been in previous years, but they are making growth. They are mastering new forms of technology in a world that now requires its citizens to be tech savvy. My students have learned to adapt to challenging situations. They have shown empathy and patience for their classmates and especially the adults in their life, including myself. Most of all, my students have built strong relationships and have learned to express themselves. If any of my students are listening tonight, I wanted to let you know I am so proud of you and keep up the hard work. But I would also like to take the time to express my concerns about starting hybrid teaching on January 25th. There's nothing more that I would like to be back in the classroom with a sense of normalcy, but let's be clear, when we go back, it will not look anything normal. When we return to school, my core teaching will stop for at least 1 to 2 weeks to teach expectations and safety related to COVID-19. When I do begin teaching core content again, I will only be covering half of my curriculum that I am now currently covering. We have also not been told how I'll be supporting my students who make the choice to stay full remote and my students when they are not in their non-in-person hybrid days. The only thing I've heard is people saying teachers will just go above and beyond, which I cannot and will not add more to my workload because the district wants to go back in person when we're not fully prepared. I'm also concerned. I know I'm not a high-risk teacher and I'm very fortunate for that, but I don't know when I'll be given the vaccine. And I can honestly say, I don't think I'll feel safe in my classroom before I have it. There are lots of questions surrounding sick time and when we will be able to take it. And if I do get sick while I'm teaching in person, who will cover my classroom? We've had continuous sub shortages in the district, and I feel COVID is only going to make that worse. I'm concerned because I'll be expected to take more sick days than teachers in middle school and high school, and that hasn't been addressed. We already have problems with SPED teachers who've been in the building having to take more sick days than teachers who have not been. My questions are echoed in my school and throughout the entire school district, and I feel it would be irresponsible for us to continue transitioning to hybrid until these questions have been answered. I'd like to thank you all for listening and have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. Next, we have Christine Quinn and Shelley Moody. Christine Quinn will be deferring her time to Shelley Moody. Christine, what you'll do is get started by saying your name and address, and then state that you will be deferring your time to Shelley Moody, and Shelley will continue with 6 minutes.
Sure. My name is Christine Quinn. Address 12521 Northeast 125th Avenue, Vancouver, Washington. And I will yield my time to my fellow teacher, Shelley Moody.
Thanks, Christine. My name is Shelley Moody. My address is 11606 Northwest 4th Court, Vancouver, 98685. Before I start my speech, I want to thank the superintendent for his press release yesterday, pushing for all K-12 staff to be vaccinated sooner. We are all hoping that this will move along the process faster. Thank you. Today, I come to speak as one of your elementary school teachers with intense concerns over the start of hybrid before our staff is vaccinated. I have 2 topics in my perspectives on the reasons why it's unwise to rush this back to the building, and the need for some teachers to be designated as staying fully remote to teach those students who cannot come into our buildings. I would like to start by saying that for the vast majority of my students, remote learning has been quite effective this fall. I have 96% of my students attending 100% of my daily Zooms. The one who has been unable lately has been suffering the drastic effects of what happens when a family is hit with COVID. My class in the 4 months of learning, for example, has mastered multi-digit multiplication and multi-digit division with a class average score of 94%. Remote learning is not failing them. That data point may not be consistent with our middle and high schoolers. That's a different topic. But the elementary colleagues are reporting high levels of learning in their classrooms. I urge any more exploration of any claim that this is not working for all students. That's simply not true. Many families are finding great success in academic growth despite being in the middle of this pandemic. This rush to return to the buildings is unwise from really your staff management perspective. Many staff are high risk or live with family members who are high risk. From what I understand, there's more than 30% of our VEA staff who reported to be in this category. These staff and their families deserve the protection of a vaccine that is literally weeks away from being available to them. There are many staff who are heavily considering medical leave to avoid putting themselves and their families at high risk. I would ask, does the district have enough long-term subs to cover all those classes? From a recent conversation with my colleagues from 7 different elementary schools in VPS, we know of a combined 27 teachers who are likely to take leave. If that trend continues across the district, you'll need 81 subs on the first day of hybrid learning, plus the 7 who are already out for covering for our kindergarten teachers who are out. Then you need to be prepared for casual day subs, for illness, quarantines, inevitable quarantines, appointments. Honestly, we have unfilled teacher positions on the regular during non-COVID times. I do not think the sub pool is deep enough to handle this for elementary schools, let alone the idea of middle and high schoolers coming then right after. The staff I know who are already looking for long-term subs have not been able to locate one. And most who are concerning leave are waiting to see the outcomes of tonight's meeting before filing their paperwork. They're holding out hope that this school board will see this plan as insufficiently cautionary to protect our staff and students. And they're hoping that they will deny the superintendent's recommendation to start so soon. I would also like to add the footnote that many school districts in the country have had to go back to remote learning because they cannot staff their buildings. This yo-yo effect of into hybrid and back to remote will be disastrous for our student learning and put many staff, students, and their families at risk for COVID. The second perspective from the staff management is a humanistic view. We're feeling pushed into the buildings with little regard for our safety. This virus is too new to say masking and social distancing alone is safe. There's much research to say it's not. Our buildings are old, our classrooms are small, our staff is aging, and many of those who are below 50 are at high risk. Experienced teachers will be needed to help students recoup lost learning time. Experienced teachers are the crux of these students that they rely on for high levels of learning. We're losing staff to early retirement, leaves, and other professions at an alarming rate. This rush to start the building will only expedite that. Staff will not return next year if they feel devalued or suffer the effects of COVID. We need to retain our teachers by keeping them healthy and safe and in our school district. I urge you to consider delaying the return to the building until staff have been vaccinated. But yet, no matter when we do return to the building, there are going to be some staff who cannot get the vaccine or have increased heightened health risks beyond typical high risk. These staff are ready and willing to continue to teach in a fully remote setting. They are the perfect people to meet the needs of our students staying fully remote. I project many families will choose this option, especially as they learn that some of the original safeguards are slowly being pared away from what we had heard of in the fall. I implore the district to designate staff to stay fully remote to be able to give attention to students who are unable to return to our buildings. Parent hat for a moment, my newest update on the reports of inequity for our kindergarten kids and really just fully remote students. They're now being relegated to a much lower educational experience. They're only accessing a live stream and watching their teacher teach the kids in the building. My analogy to this is akin to sticking a kid in the hallway, telling them to watch the window and just cracking the door so they can hear a little bit. This isn't a high quality, this isn't any semblance of high quality learning experience. And for many kids, it's discrimination. They're home due to medical conditions or disabilities. I dread the thought of all of our fully remote students being subjected to this type of learning experience. But this doesn't have to be the case. Other districts in our area are designating staff to stay fully remote. Reports from staff in Evergreen, Ridgefield, and Battleground have already started that in motion. Yet as of Friday, I was informed by our HR department that no such option is available to VPS staff. My question is, why is VPS not doing this to protect our high-risk staff and to serve our fully remote students in an equitable way? This seems like the answer to two significant problems. I plead, don't cave to the loud minority who scream that kids need to be in the buildings now. Delay this return until staff have been vaccinated. And whenever the return is, designate staff to stay fully remote to continue teaching those students. It'll take the workload off of our teachers in the building. It will serve those students better. And it is going to allow our high-risk staff a safe way to continue in their profession. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Nadia Lutz.
Sorry, it made me rejoin. I'm here.
Welcome. Go ahead and state your name and address, and you have 2 minutes.
Nadia Lutz, 11900 Northeast 18th Street, apartment 177, Vancouver, Washington, 98684. On October 6th, I addressed the board with my concerns about high-risk employees and the district's lack of seeking any and all options for alternative work as outlined in Proclamation 2046-2. It has since been another 3 months and there has been no update on whether or not there will be accommodations. In Evergreen Public Schools, they are allowing high-risk teachers to continue to work remotely with the students who wish to remain in a remote learning environment. If something similar is not in our plan, I strongly urge the board to pause the return of students in order to provide these accommodations to high-risk employees. I feel these accommodations are going to be critical as we know there has been a substitute shortage in our district. Multiple times a year, classrooms are left without substitutes. This is concerning as we head back into the building where subs will be in even higher demand as teachers will need to take leave if no high-risk accommodations can be provided or as people get sick. The district has stated in past board meetings that they have a willing pool of substitutes. We know these subs often work in more than one district. With other districts needing subs for long-term coverage, can the district safely say there will be enough subs to cover long-term and daily needs? If not, this can create an issue when we run out of people in building to cover classrooms and cannot split up classrooms as a last resort due to having to keep cohorts of students separated. Another area of concern is the social distancing in the classroom. I have measured my room and I can only fit 8 students safely, yet I have more than 16 students. In the reopening guidelines, it states over and over again that 6 feet or more of social distancing must be maintained at all times in order to reopen school buildings safely. We are being told we might have to put students less than 6 feet apart. If we cannot maintain 6 feet of social distancing at all times in the classroom, then we cannot safely reopen schools. If social distancing cannot be maintained, this also makes lunchtime unsafe. Students will be eating unmasked in classrooms. If we cannot go into a restaurant and eat, then how is it safe for students and staff to be eating indoors? Additionally, Clark County only met 50% of the metrics to move into phase 2, and COVID cases just jumped to 397 per 100,000 today. This shows that the spread of COVID is not slowing down in our community. New data shows that COVID-19 case rates increased more sharply for in-person teachers and school staff compared to the rest of their community. We cannot rush into reopening buildings before making sure all guidelines can be met. In the original hybrid plan, there was a 2-week space between each grade level returning to school to ensure safety guidelines could be followed and that there was no spread of COVID in schools. Now we are going to bring back all elementary grades within a period of less than 2 weeks. How can we ensure that the plan is working safely if we are rushing back into the buildings this quickly? With the vaccine so close, I urge the board to slow down this process until more teachers can be vaccinated and we can see what effect the winter holidays will have on our local COVID numbers. I feel that we should prioritize bringing back small groups of older students, just like we did for our elementary kids, instead of trying to overcrowd our elementary classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jean Fedorovich. Oh, you're on mute.
Quote of the year. My name is Jeannie Fedorovich. My address is 3021 Northeast 27th Avenue, Portland, Oregon, 97212. And I have been a teacher in the Vancouver School District for 28 years, and I currently teach at Skyview High School, where I've been for the last 20. I'm speaking tonight to urge caution in bringing students back in person. Our numbers are soaring, our hospitals are filling, and there is growing evidence of increasing community spread when schools reopen. Now is not the time to go back to in-person learning. Is distance learning perfect? No. Is in-person better? Usually. And as a world language teacher, I long for peer-to-peer interaction. It's true that distance learning is hard. In my 28 years in Vancouver, I have never, ever worked as hard as I am now. But my students are doing very, very well. They're connecting, and my failure rates are consistent with yearly averages. And Skyview is doing an outstanding job with building-wide efforts to reach out and help struggling students. We can do this. We can keep building on what we're doing well and what we've been working so hard to do. Now is not the time to introduce hybrid learning. Hybrid instruction is going to give students less contact time with teachers, and the fear and threat of being put into quarantine will break any solid momentum that we have built this year. The vaccine rollout has begun. We are so close to the other end. Please don't give up now. While I do truly believe that we should stay remote until all are vaccinated, parents at least have the option to keep students home if they live in a multi-generational home or if they live with someone who is immunocompromised. Your teachers, however, will not have that choice. And my son is high risk. Many of us, myself included, have spent the last 10 months at home. We haven't seen family. We've followed all of the guidelines to stay safe. Please don't force us into risky situations when the light is shining at the end of the tunnel. Please, if you are committed to reopening schools, I urge you to follow the lead taken by other Portland metro area districts and do not force any of your teachers back into in-person learning until they've had the opportunity to be vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Bethany Schweitzer.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Bethany Schweitzer. I live at 4304 Northeast 55th Place in Vancouver, Washington. I sent an email out to the school board and the superintendent yesterday, and I'd like to just reread that email again today. My name is Bethany Schweitzer, and I'm a teacher and parent for Vancouver Public Schools. I teach choir at McLaughlin Middle School and Fort Vancouver High School. I've been teaching for over 10 years. I speak today to express my concerns for our secondary music programs in our current circumstances. As you may be aware, the preservation of our programs relies heavily on the number of students that forecast for our classes from year to year. This alone has been a source of struggle for me and many other secondary music teachers from year to year. I have personally seen my programs diminish in spite of continuous and diligent efforts to recruit, retrain, and grow student enrollment in choir, something we have had no opportunity to do this year. There are a number of reasons for this that I would be very willing to discuss in the future. The focus now is on the toll that distance and now hybrid learning will take on our programs should they not be taken into consideration in the coming weeks and months. This has been my experience with distance learning thus far. Many of my students opted to take classes online that would not put them in the uncomfortable situation at home of singing or playing instruments in their home environments. Several students have shared that they have many siblings also in Zoom classes, parents who sleep during the day, or younger siblings to help care for that prevent them from fully participating in choir. Of the students that remain in my classes, many still feel very apprehensive about the same issue. I've tried to create opportunities to continue to learn music without the pressure of singing at home. This has been successful for some students who have been interested in sound production or playing instruments, but the majority of my students are enduring online learning with the hope of singing in a group again. Our students are eager to make music again. For many, the access to music classes will help them to begin to recover from what has been a very difficult year. Our classes have always been highly geared towards social and emotional learning, something that has come into focus recently. Music is core curriculum for a reason. As the product of a high quality music education myself, I can attest to how music helps us develop into valuable and functional members of society, and I hope you agree. My biggest concern is that with the transition to hybrid learning and the possibility of budget shortfalls for next year is that the access to our music programs will be lost. I urge you to consider the provision of protective equipment specific to music programs. I also urge you to consider maintaining our classes for next year, regardless of our numbers for forecasting, so that we have the buffer to rebuild. Please consider creating a committee of secondary music teachers to come up with proposals for how we can safely begin to make music again. Such a committee would be highly valuable to maintain in a district that proudly commits itself to arts education. Our district has already made a huge investment in equipment and certified teachers. Allow us, the experts in the classrooms, to now help navigate how we can use our resources to provide the absolute best access to music education in our district. I will be the first to volunteer for such a committee. Thank you for your consideration.
Next, we have Megan Crozier.
Madam Chair, we've got Ann Median also on the list. We can advance Megan now and come back to Ann if you'd like.
Okay, I apologize. She fell off my printout, so I will go back to the electronic form. Let's start with Megan and then we'll go back. Is Megan
working on it?
Hi. I'm Megan Crozier. My address is 1914 Northwest Sierra Way in Camas, and I teach first grade dual language at Harney. Yesterday, I co-signed a letter urging you to delay the expansion of in-person learning due to safety concerns. Today, I want to talk to you about mental health concerns. This pandemic has reconstructed the way that we deliver instruction. Overnight, we had to learn how to engage with students in an entirely new way. Unsure of the model for school in the fall, we had to prepare for flexibility and then attend hours of technology training in just 1 week before school started. As we've tried to settle into a consistent teaching routine, there has been the constant pressure to get students back into the classroom as quickly as possible. It seems simple, but those of us on the front lines of this know that it is far from simple. We know how much time it takes to adequately prepare for major changes in school day schedules, let alone shift from remote to hybrid. We know that there are not enough subs to cover long-term leave, quarantine leave, or even 1 day of sick leave. We know that there are concerns about transportation, bathrooms, shared materials, ventilation, PPE, arrival, dismissal, specialist teachers, and so much more. We also know that an extended hybrid school day allows little time to support remote-only students. And we know that the workload expectation for the hybrid schedule is untenable. As we've heard tonight, we also know that the hybrid model is equally disruptive for families as it is for teachers. What we're not sure about is if the decision makers know this. In fact, consistent with previous communication about in-person plans, we were emailed last week less than 2 hours before families about projected start dates. When we aren't told the plans in advance, we have very little time to prepare, especially when we are devoted full time to the current remote teaching assignments we have. I wonder if the assumption will be that we will prepare in the margins of our lives, evenings and weekends. I recognize that remote teaching has been hard on many people. I do see why there should be small groups of students in the building. Of course, we ultimately want to see students in person and return to normal. But rushing to expand in-person learning with high case numbers, little notice, no remote option for teachers, and without a vaccine makes us feel like little concern is being given to our physical and emotional well-being. I will close with this. My option right now is to take an unpaid leave of absence if I do not feel safe returning to the building. I know several colleagues that feel equally unsafe but cannot afford to take leave, so they will return despite their fears. I wonder how instruction will be impacted with teachers working under that kind of emotional strain. I also know colleagues that do have the means and do plan to take leave, but have wrestled with the decision because of how much we love our students and want to support our families. In light of the emotional toll it has had on me personally to be faced with this decision, I fear that if I do take a temporary leave of absence, I may not, after 15 years of teaching, return to the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Anne Medulline. Anne, I apologize for skipping over you. Go ahead.
Okay, hi, my name is Anne Medellin. My address is 3215 Northeast 16th Avenue, Portland, Oregon. And good evening, and thank you for allowing me to address some concerns that I myself and my colleagues have. My name is Anne Medillin, and I am a teacher in the Vancouver Public Schools. I am speaking today to express my concerns for our district's secondary music programs in our current circumstances. You may or may not be aware, but music is a core subject. Our programs rely on large numbers of students that forecast for our classes, and our classes are taught exclusively in an ensemble setting. Currently, we are having our jobs at the behest of 11 to 18-year-old students choose. They choose our class. The pie that represents the large number of choices kids have is so large that we have no chance to meet the goals of the district for music education. The less contact we have with our current and prospective students, the less likely we will have adequate numbers. We have talented teachers in our district who can accomplish this, and now we are faced with COVID and remote learning. Remote learning has hit our classes hard. We are faced with students dropping or will drop because they are asked to do things we have never asked them to do, such as sing alone in front of their peers, play their trumpet in the morning while others are sleeping or working, trying to keep string instruments in tune, inadequate equipment, including microphones that aren't appropriate for instruments, asking students to make videos for a variety of reasons, performing these tasks in their current living situations, along with more global issues teachers are experiencing. We are committed to teaching our students how to sing and play an instrument while we integrate other activities to accommodate a variety of learners. It's an amazing challenge that I really do not think many understand. The focus for our teachers is now on the toll that distance learning and now hybrid learning will take on our programs. Our group of teachers need to have the opportunity to see our students and be supplied proper equipment, but I worry that we are an already complex group to manage because most of us teach in multiple schools, multiple schedules, rely on transportation, rely on shared instruments, as well as shared spaces. We are also worried about not being vaccinated, and we acknowledge the aerosols surrounding choir, band, and even sports. I know the district stands behind the arts. We might just have an opportunity here to be visionary, rebuild, rethink, and plan for these amazing programs to come out of remote learning in a positive way. All research points to the fact that music shapes our students in ways that improve their place in the world. For many, the access to music classes will help them begin to recover from what has been a very difficult year. My greatest concern is that with the transition to hybrid learning and the possibility of budget shortfalls for next year, we are faced with music programs that will be overlooked. The investment that VPS has put in auditoriums, equipment, instruments, sound systems, and most importantly, our certified staff members cannot be money wasted. I urge our VPS decision makers to consider maintaining our classes for next year, regardless of our numbers for forecasting, so we can have the opportunity to rebuild. I would also ask that you consider how we can manage rebuilding better communication, fairness, equity, and engagement in this process to what I believe is one of the most powerful things, the power of music. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Next, we have Kara Bailey.
Or they just ignore it.
Ms. Bailey sent correspondence that she's unable to attend.
Okay, thank you for that update. Next, we have Marla Rapp.
Let's move on to the next one. We don't see Marla in the inbox. There are some that are identified by a telephone number. So we'll need to kind of do a little bit of homework here.
Okay, yes, it is a huge attendee list tonight. Next up, we have Don Gali. Hi, welcome.
Hello. Dawn Galley, 10203 Northeast 20th Avenue, Vancouver. I thank you for your time. My name is Dawn Galley. I'm a parent in Vancouver School District and a teacher in Clark County. I've been teaching from home since March, parenting from home since March, living only at home since March, and like many other parents in our district, slowly dying from all of this since March. News of the vaccine last month gave me hope that first responders would be safer, hope that the elderly would be safer, hope that frontline workers would be safer, and hope that teachers would be able to welcome children back into their classrooms because it would be safer. While I'm excited to rid my house of my children for a few hours a week, I worry that this rush to bring them back into schools is not well planned nor safe. I have not heard word that teachers in Clark County have gotten even one dose of the vaccine, and teachers my age and younger will not be able to receive it until April. While I applaud Dr. Webb's letter imploring the governor to move all teachers up on the vaccine schedule to make in-person learning safer, I feel that the letter coming out on the eve of the school board meeting a little less than sincere. I would expect a true leader of our teachers would have written the letter before announcing to families the date he plans to stuff children back into classrooms. Additionally, cases are rising in Clark County. According to the decision tree sent out by the governor, if cases are rising, districts should pause bringing more students into buildings. There should not even be a debate. There's been a lot of talk about the mental health of our students as the big reason to bring children back into school in person. Yesterday, my son's 4th grade class had a discussion about how this would look. I was able to listen in on some of the conversation. One would expect that students would be overjoyed with the prospect of returning to school in person. What I heard was fear and concern. I heard students asking questions about having to ride the bus with students not from their class. What if they don't wear a mask? What if they sit too close to me? What if I get sick? What if I get the class sick? What if I get my family sick? They sounded more concerned about keeping their friends, family, and community safe than they did about being around their friends at school. That speaks volumes. And while there's been a lot of talk about the mental health of our students, there's been very little talk about the mental health of our teachers. As I stated earlier, I am also a teacher in Clark County. I have looked at the proposed hybrid schedule laid out on the Vancouver School District website. It looks a lot like the schedule I currently have in my district, as I've been teaching small groups of students since October, while also leading live sessions and planning on-demand learning. It is not sustainable and it is not practical. What you are expecting teachers to do will break them. If they don't quit after the school year, they will no longer be the teachers they once were. Having to teach and plan for 3 completely different settings is mentally and emotionally exhausting. I have cried more since October than I did my entire first year teaching in 2007. This rush to bring students in so quickly without even one dose of the vaccine being administered and a workload that is triple the size of any other school year will lead to huge teacher attrition and burnout. Many of you on the board are educators, some even colleagues of mine. You know what you should do. Make the right choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Melanie Gabriel.
Hi, sorry, we're in the car right now because it's before our karate classes, but dear Vancouver School Board members, my name is
Melanie. Do you mind starting just with your name and address, please?
Yeah, my name is Melanie, and my address is 1319 Northwest 110th Street, Vancouver, Washington, 98685. I'm in the 8th grade at Thomas Jefferson. I moved to Vancouver in the middle of the pandemic. I dropped out of school from April to October. Online school was just too hard, and it caused me so much. Oh, sorry. My mom had signed up to do this, but she is giving me her time, if that's okay. Online school was just too hard, and it caused me so much stress and anxiety. I was loaded with assignments with little to no instructions from my teacher. Zoom was not a thing at the very beginning. I never saw my teacher's faces. I had no help, and it was overwhelming for me. I was so lonely and isolated due to the shutdown. In October, I decided to try school again, even if it was online. I needed to see people and meet other kids. I needed to see people other than my family. It was a better experience for me than April through October. I could see teachers and I was supported for the first time ever. but I could not see my peers. I was staring at a black screens all day, every day. I thought I would be able to make friends, but I haven't been able to. My depression has gotten much worse, and I currently have regular therapists and a crisis therapist come to my house when things get really bad. I have scars all up and down my legs from harming myself. My parents have called the suicide hotline with me multiple times and taken me to the hospital for attempts of my life. I'm not alone. There are so many kids in our district that feel the same way I do. We've been crying out for help to the school board, school districts, the governor, and other government officials. The lack of resources and activities for us is a huge problem. We are suffering in silence, and the few of us that are brave enough to speak out are being ignored. We have been forgotten. We are not resilient, and some of us are now gone forever. Please listen to my cries for help. Please come up with a plan to get 6th through 12th graders back in school this year, or you are going to lose many more of us. I am barely hanging on. I have the biggest support system I can, and I'm barely hanging on right now. Last week, a student from Cassidy Middle School named Taven Brains shot himself in the head. He couldn't hang on anymore and saw no other way out. I know exactly how he felt. He is currently in critical condition at the hospital. This is one of our own. How many of us are you willing to lose before you make the right decision to open our schools? I've tried to explain so many times to adults in charge how we are feeling and what this is doing to us. Last year, I gave an oral testimony to the Oregon State Senate. I would like to share with you. Please take the time to read this because it is crucial to all of us students that you really understand what is happening to us right now and how we feel. Good morning, Madam Chair Giesler and members of the Senate. My name is Melanie. I'm 13 years old and in 8th grade. I probably have 100 drafts of this testimony for you. But then in the middle of the night, it dawned on me you've probably been flooded with scientific data and on why schools should open, what parents are witnessing happening to their children. So I decided it was my turn to be open and honest and really help you understand what it's like to be a kid and what this shutdown is doing to us. I would like to ask you to close your eyes and take a trip with me. Think back to what it was like being a kid. Remember your friendships, class parties, music performances, sports and clubs, spirit week, dances, field trips, lunch and recess with your buddies. Do you remember how fun it was to be a kid? Now imagine with no warning at all, somebody taking it all away and placing you inside a glass box. Imagine yourself in that glass box. Your glass box is going to vary depending on your family. Your glass box could have a mom and a dad, or it could have just one. Your glass box might have a parent at home with you all the time, or you could be all alone in that glass box by yourself all day. If you're lucky enough, it has a sibling to play with, but not always. You might have a phone or other ways to contact people outside your box, but you might not. Even if your glass box has someone in it, you are still in the most lonely, isolated place you've ever been in your entire life. The worst thing about this glass box is you can see everything going on. You can see people out to eat, going to work, at the gym, gambling at casinos, and drinking. You can see the adults who put you in this box and insist that you stay in this box, traveling to Hawaii and Mexico. You can't leave your glass box, yet you have to. When you can't leave your glass box, you have to stay in your glass box. You cannot go to school, play sports, or do anything the rest of the world is doing right now. You've placed the burden of the pandemic on the children to carry, and we are done. We will not carry your burden anymore. We are going to make a stand, and we won't stop until we are back in school where we belong. I'm asking you to shatter our glass box and set us free. The message the adults in charge is sending us is that we don't matter. Our lives aren't as important as the need to stay in the glass box, although scientists say we should be in school. The governor has said it's been proven that keeping us in these glass boxes is causing more harm to us than the virus itself. You're keeping us locked up inside these glass boxes. How are we supposed to trust any of you? Is this really the message you want to send us? Or do you want to stand with us and help us shatter our glass box? Senator Giesler, I wrote an email in August explaining my vision to help with the homeless epidemic. I've carried your response with me ever since that day. Dear Melanie, I think you're quite wise, and I'm very grateful for your leadership. Thanks for sharing your vision with all of us. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you're not old enough to make a difference. In fact, you might be the only person that can make a change. Don't ever give up on your voice or vision, and don't stop asking for those meetings, Sarah. I won't give up until I'm back in school. I will keep pressuring all of you until you take me seriously and realize what your decisions are doing to us. Again, I am pleading I'm pleading with you to shatter my glass box and all the children's glass boxes with me.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Next, we have Melissa Beatty. Oh, excuse me. We're going to loop back to Marla Rapp, it looks like.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
We can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I apologize about that. My name is Marla Rapp. I am a parent. I have 3 children in Vancouver schools. I have a child at Thomas Jefferson, Columbia River, and VSAA. I'm a local attorney in town, and I'm also part of the Foundation for Vancouver Schools, as well as various PTAs. So I've been very involved in the school district for a long time. I'm writing to urge school board to follow the recommendations outlined by our superintendent and allow our students some type of return to school. I understand the caution required in dealing with COVID-19. However, Dr. Webb and his staff have created a plan that follows our governor's recommendations and to allow children back in school. Children at home doing their best with online school are struggling emotionally, academically, and socially. This format is not working for them in any way. Working at home has created an environment of sadness and apathy for my children specifically. I've been extremely concerned with my children's mental health. And again, I understand that teachers are worried, but when a plan can be put in place that is safe and does prevent transmission, then children's emotional health finally needs to be addressed and prioritized. Zoom classes, Zoom counselors, Zoom meetings, Zoom play rehearsals, Zoom football meetings. It's exhausting and frankly gets ridiculous to subject these children to full out screen time for any and every educational and social event within schools they face. I understand their apathy and lack of motivation. Constantly working from home, separated from peers, and pretty much marginalized by our society's overwhelming and not always accurate fear is causing severe harm to an entire generation. We just heard that. We just heard a young lady speaking about how challenging this is. Again, I'm not discounting fear. I'm just allowing for the fact that we are in a place where schools can open safely. It's not a rush. We've had this for over 10 months now. This is something where many states, many schools have been dealing and addressing with. We've learned how to be safe, how to prevent transmissions. Yes, it's exciting a vaccine's coming and we know it'll be here, but there are also other ways that transmission can be prevented, and we've seen it. There are many schools all over the states that are open. Yes, at times there are problems, but in general, transmission is very low in schools and schools are operating successfully. Further, for example, my daughter, a senior at VSA, is applying to schools around the country for college. She doesn't have the same level of learning as students in other states go. This isn't in any way an attack on the fact that our state has stayed home and quarantined responsibly, but now there's a safe plan. There's an opportunity that allows her back in school to interact with her teachers and with maybe allow her an opportunity to get caught up somewhat. We can't say the argument this is something our entire country is dealing with. She's about to be in a situation where she'll be in school with children who've had almost normal or much closer to normal experiences than she has. This is something that can't be made up easily or quickly. And that is also another reason why I'm hoping that we can get the seniors and the kids back in school as well. Finally, we have special education teachers in the classroom who are actively teaching their students. They've been at school for months. They've been expected to be there, and it's been considered safe for them to be there. I'm not understanding why there's a distinction being made between our special education teachers and our general teachers. I'm not the only one to think this. Around the country, our top medical providers want kids back in school. The AAP, okay, be very fast. The AAP definitely wants them back, as does Dr. Fauci, and this is a crisis. This is a crisis among the kids. Choices have consequences, and our children are suffering for this, are paying a very steep price for this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Marla. Glad we found you.
Thank you so much for finding me.
Next up is Melissa Beatty. I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Hi, can you see and hear me? It just kicked me off and I rejoined.
We can hear you. We cannot see you.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, hang on. There we go.
Yep.
Better?
Yes. Go ahead and state your name and address.
Great. Yeah. Hi, I'm Melissa Beatty. I live at 110 Evergreen Drive in Vancouver. I want to thank you, Dr. Webb and the school board for this opportunity. I really can't imagine what it's been like during this year to be in your position. And I never thought I would contact the school board, and before coronavirus, never did. I'm a voting parent and we donate annually to the VPS Foundation. So I figured it was time you heard from me directly. I also submitted email remarks that I would like considered as well. Our daughter's remote learning experience has been exceptional, and our teacher has indicated that it is consistent with the rest of her class as well. I care so much about this topic that I have coordinated with 2 other parents that we can fully explore the topics that we wanted to discuss while still respecting the time of 3 minutes each. The topic I'd like to focus on for my time is the safety requirements of in-person instruction during a pandemic and the details and nuts and bolts of the school day that I have not seen covered by any district communications thus far. Why? Because the idea of school is to have an environment that is conducive to learning. If the idea is to teach and the environment is one that is a safety risk, then the teacher's reaction will be primarily self-preservation and secondarily to teach. Right now, I posit we have a better situation with remote learning if the goal is to teach than we do if we go back in person. Because right now, there are so many safety risks that are left unaddressed. Let's talk first about the risk to the teachers. When they get sick, they become the primary vector of transmission in the classroom, especially now because we're going back in time to a classical model of education where there will be less opportunities, if at all, for group learning, where there are right now, and more lecture time where students face the teacher and the teacher directly faces their students. The whole class will be present over a period of just 3 days, which is within the norm for asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic spreading. Teachers in elementary school routinely have to get into a student's personal space to tie shoes, resolve conflicts, help them with concepts at their desk. When in person, it's the teacher handling it in person in their personal space. There's no alternate. Teachers routinely get sneezed on and coughed on in regular times. Do we think this is just not going to happen? I've seen kids remove their masks to sneeze, yell, or talk. They're not adults. They don't always think things through. Even adults in this community resist masks, and those adults have children too. When are the teachers going to eat? Are they supposed to remove their mask and eat with the kids in the room with the aerosols that have been building for the last 3 hours, removing all the preventatives from wearing a mask in the enclosed space? In an indoor environment, let's talk about the airflow. Hybrid does not adequately mitigate the teacher's risk. Just because the class is at half capacity, the teacher still speaks and sees each child over 3 days and can potentially spread it to the whole class, regardless of if the class is present at the same time. So what happens when the teachers get sick? Demographically, aren't most subs retired, inexperienced in the classroom? Before the pandemic, wasn't the sub shortage so bad that the district reduced standards to allow non-certificated subs in the classroom that only had a bachelor's degree? Given these demographics, do you seriously think subs will be able to handle hybrid learning curricula with all of its difficulty in 2 months in an environment that poses a safety risk? And I'd like to end with this,
thank you.
If that's my time. Why are we meeting remotely today if it is so safe to be back in person?
Thank you very much. The next listing is Mark Beatty from your same address.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, good evening. I'm Mark Beatty. I'm also at 110 Evergreen Drive in Vancouver, and I'll reiterate everything that Melissa just said. I also submitted written comments that I'd like to be considered by the board as well. So I appreciate the time to speak. I want to address something relatively narrow. One thing that has not been taken into consideration, as the best that I can tell from the CDC guidelines and the boards and the plans from the Vancouver School District, are that there are new strains of COVID now circulating in the population. And there's at least 2 that have been identified that are both more contagious, 65 to 75% more contagious, and also more likely to cause serious illness among younger people. To date in the United States, they haven't really been doing genetic sequencing on the tests that have been taken. The testing that's been done has been inadequate to begin with. So we're really not sure how bad or how widespread this is in the United States at this point. But apparently in the United Kingdom, 90% of new cases are these new strains. The other thing I want to address, and I included some references in the written materials, and I would ask that you actually look at those things. Another aspect is that we seem to be in this goal to get everybody back, and we go through this start and stop phase. We ramp up to go back, and then we pull back. If we start up again as with hybrid learning, then the cases spike, we're going to have to stop again. That starting and stopping is a tremendous disruption and will set everything back much farther than simply committing to the online model and directing the resources that we need to make that work. I understand that there are some families that are challenged with this. Direct more resources to those families to help them out. Most people, to reiterate the issue of the mechanics, the plan that's been put out is basically everybody gets more exposure, but there's no evidence that this 2-day-a-week model is going to provide better education than the online model that the teachers are actually finally getting in the groove to do. So there's nothing that I've seen that shows that a hybrid model of classroom attendance is better than a dedicated online model. About 40% of adults right now don't even believe that COVID is real or is an actual serious disease. The board's plan basically is, or the proposed plan is basically that we're going to rely on those adults who don't believe that COVID is real to screen their children for symptoms before sending them into the class.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for that. We are at time.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is Brooke Bertrand.
Okay.
There.
You good?
Yes, go ahead and state your name and address.
Okay, my name's Brooke Bertrand. I live at 106 Northwest, 118th Circle, 98685. So I'm actually going to be speaking about why I think it's very important for kids to go back to school. I am a mother of 2 kids in kindergarten and 4th grade, and I also am a substitute for the school district. And I just want to start off by giving an example. I totally feel like schools are safe and they can do it safely in a safe measure. My kindergartner started off the year remote learning, and I'm going to be honest, he hated it. He hated sitting in Zoom. He was bored. He got distracted. And these are 5-year-olds. So when they decided to send kindergarten back, I mean, it was a night and day difference. He was so excited to go to school. He came home and he was like, Mom, I love school. I love my teacher. I love being in there. It was a total 180-degree difference. And I find it hard to believe that everyone is saying schools can't open up safely when there's been numerous hundreds and hundreds of schools that have done it nationwide that have opened up safely. There is a safe plan. And there's schools in our state that have opened up with no problems. I mean, going to hybrid, it's only 2 days a week. So I appreciate that because it's a step in the right direction. Teachers who are not at home with us, they don't see the effects that it has on our children. We as parents and I myself as a mother have to see how frustrated and my kids are every day with Zoom. My son is in 4th grade and he is so bored. I mean, he used to love school and now he's like, ugh, Zoom again. I get it that not every teacher wants to keep doing remote. And I know that there are tons out there that want to go back to school. And I appreciate that. And you know what? Teachers are essential. Classroom is the best place for the learning environment for our children to succeed the best. They have to thrive. They thrive in the classroom just as well as my kindergarten came home. I know that when we send our kids back, they are going to thrive. Pediatricians, child psychologists, Dr. Fauci, Governor Inslee, and Superintendent Webb, they all agree now that teachers are essential. Being essential is in the classroom. It's not remote learning, okay? The other point I wanna make is when teachers say that they don't feel safe, kids are not super spreaders. They are not at all. They are very low risk. I understand that it is possible for children to get COVID, but they are extremely low risk. And I don't appreciate them using our kids as political pawns to get what they want. Okay, bottom line, our students deserve better. Education should always take a priority over the scare of a virus. Now, I totally want the teachers to get the vaccine right away too. I think that's great. And I hope that they get it right away because they are essential. Okay.
We're at time.
What?
We're at time, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I'm just begging you, please, as a mother, I'm speaking for hundreds of mothers out there and parents, please let our kids go back to school. They deserve better. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, we have Christina Smith.
Good evening. I'm Christine Smith. Can you see me? I can at least, I think I
can hear you. We cannot see you.
Okay, well, that's good enough, I guess. Oh, wait, there's start my video. There we go.
Okay, go ahead and say your name and address and you'll have 3 minutes.
Sure, just a second there. Thank you. Hi, I'm Christine Smith of 27048 8th Street, Vancouver, Washington. I'm a parent of a 3rd grade student at Halk Elementary School. Good evening, Superintendent Webb and school board members. On January 11th, I provided written comment to the school board and would like that to be considered as well as my testimony today. Today, I would like to speak in opposition of the plan that you will be discussing later in the agenda to return our students in the Vancouver School District to in-person learning, beginning within the next few weeks. I'm a licensed CPA and spend much of my time assisting my clients with performing risk versus benefit analysis. I would like to share that as a parent looking at the proposal, the risk versus benefit analysis in this plan is flawed. The school district's own press release from January 11th argues for our teachers to have a higher prioritizations for vaccines. By their own press release, you recognize that you are putting our teachers at risk and are artificially accelerating by a couple of months that in-person and hybrid learning. Accelerating this time frame ahead of ensuring our teachers are vaccinated provides no benefit to anyone. This hybrid plan still leaves 3 days, 2 to 3 days of remote per week for each child, but twice the risk for the entire classroom seeing their teacher. No classroom projects or working in groups will be done in classroom learning, where right now students can work in groups remotely. Because of the need for social distancing, students will be more often than not be confined to a desk and chair for a full day with little to no room for movement out of fear of violating social distance rules. This has already proven to be a detriment to our students. There will be less understanding from kids that potentially have hard of hearing disabilities, or students will not understand new words as they are muffled with mask. And finally, there will be less understanding of facial expressions that can be communicated via Zoom. And we know that 90% of understanding comes from nonverbal cues. There is no evidence that hybrid teaching environment will be better than the remote environment we have now. I wanted to be part of this record that my son's teacher, Brooke Caden, 3rd grade, and all his support teachers at Houck are doing an absolutely amazing job in this virtual environment. I see growth in him, engagement in him, and a desire to learn that is still being developed by Mrs. Caden and all the teachers as they support his learning. As amazing as these teachers are, teachers cannot teach in both in-person and remote at the same times. All students will get a less robust experience because teachers' energies will be divided. We already expect too much of our teachers. We expect them to be therapists, custodians, dietitians, security officers, and now we are expecting them to potentially teach twice as much, once in a learning environment and again in-person hybrid classroom. The connection that our children had developed with their teachers is going to be lost if a family is selected virtual only, or we will be guilted them into selecting this very risky hybrid option.
Christine, I'm sorry, that's time. Thank you. Next up, we have Heather Nelson.
Okay, am I there? Can you hear me?
We can. Please state your name and address.
Heather Nelson, 3602 Northwest 121st Circle in Vancouver. So I am going to read, I emailed you guys over the last few weeks as well. So I urge you to approve and implement the plan that Dr. Webb has put forward to return to hybrid learning on January 19th with our younger learners. All of Vancouver students desperately need to return to the classroom. So many students and families are struggling with depression, isolation, severe fatigue from distance learning, and the lack of social interaction due to not being in person in school. I shared an email recently with the board laying out my observations, and I've heard from friends and family as well. My 2 sons have done the best they can with distance learning and have had phenomenal teachers. But I'm starting to see it take a toll on my 2nd grader. He tells me many times a week how he wants to be back in regular school, even if it means wearing a mask and only being there 2 days a week. He experiences sadness, frustration with distance learning. I observed an interaction between him and an arts block teacher last week that was strictly due to technology confusion, and the teacher wasn't even aware it was happening. And he ended up in tears hiding on our staircase. He is not typically an emotional labile child, so this is very unusual, and I attribute it to distance learning. I've observed my younger son, a kindergartner, sit for almost 20 minutes during an arts block and during technical difficulties. And after 20 minutes of difficulty, the class finally started, and then 4 or 5 students had trouble seeing the screen, hearing the teacher. So we had about 10 minutes of instructional time after 20 kindergartners sat for 20 minutes, not learning anything. A final experience I want to share is in regards to a family member of mine, a former 5th grader at Vancouver Public School, was struggling so severely with isolation, depression, anger. We had a family meeting and decided to pull her from Vancouver Public School because it was life or death for her, literally life or death. We enrolled her at Kingsway, and she has improved phenomenally with the interaction being around other students and teachers. If they can do it, why can't we? I do want to give credit to the teachers for the hard work and effort they've put in. They're amazing, they're phenomenal, but distance learning is not working for them. I would like to know why many private schools and childcare centers have been successfully open for months and attribute less than 1% of cases in Clark County. This proves to me that public schools can be open and we should be able to return.
Heather, sorry, we're at time. Thank you so much.
I just want to say the hybrid learning for the kindergarten is working. So people saying that hybrid is not valuable, they are wrong because it has been phenomenal.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Carrie Van Ostren.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Van Ostren. My address is 2907 East 24th Street here in Vancouver, 98661. I am a longtime educator within Vancouver Public Schools and also proud to represent Vancouver Education Association as our local president. I appreciate the chance to share again this evening, especially to express the eagerness with which educators are exploring the prospect of expanding on-site services, but in particular when it is safe. There are two top aspects based on member survey results that indicated community comfort with a safe experience on site. And it included a downward trend in case counts, which as evidence today, we are headed in the opposite direction. And I would reiterate what was shared earlier this evening, that the state guidance has also encouraged a pause to the expansion of on-site services when we are experiencing an upward trend in case counts, as we are based on today's report. But the second aspect that would greatly increase folks' comfort would be direct access to vaccine. And also want to reiterate gratitude to local superintendent advocacy around accelerating educator access, but also want to reiterate how it feels a little bit too little too late, because it would have been far more genuine to have that advocacy take place prior to the exploration of expanded on-site services. With that in mind, the two priorities I would urge the board and VPS administrators to consider are really revolving around the avoidance of a rush towards this transition. So we are eager to partner and collaboratively develop a plan that can be clearly communicated to stakeholders, both educators and family members alike. And at this time, that level of collaboration has not taken place, and clear communication surrounding the plan, barring those details that will hopefully be disclosed later this evening, are absent as well, with an impending transition date as early as January 19th. In addition, with the concern revolving around a rush, a gradual and methodical rollout to the expansion of on-site services is what I would advocate for, to provide us sufficient time to prepare, so that again, stakeholders and direct practitioners have opportunity to understand guidelines and be able to clarify for families what hasn't yet been communicated to them either. But ultimately, a later start date, expanding one grade level at a time, and considering the family options, but the absence of educator options, both including grade level teachers, fine arts specialists, and other specialists in our midst, are aspects that have yet to be explored or considered. And if we are to implement and have sufficient opportunity to evaluate and adjust our experience on site before continued expansion, that will set students and staff up for success. We look forward to partnering with VPS around these measures.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Next up, we have Shannon Taylor. Welcome. Go ahead.
Anna Taylor from 2200 Northwest 151st Street here in Vancouver, 98685. I have a high schooler at Skyview High School and a middle schooler at Alki, and another high schooler that would be at Vancouver but is in Evergreen doing the Cascadia Tech program. As I can say, as a family who has experienced COVID, I question with the uptick in COVID cases, we're not teasing apart the severity of each case. And so even though there's an increase in COVID cases, severity wise and deaths and so forth. I can say for our family, experiencing COVID was varied. And mostly just like any other year of a cold or flu. I don't know how to address concerns of both teachers and students, but I noticed that most of there, I don't believe has been any high school students. There may have been that I missed, but as a mother of high schoolers and middle schoolers, I want to impress my concerns upon you. 3 years ago, I did lose my teenage son to suicide. With that, my children, my other 4 children are at statistically an increased risk of suicide. I can say that since COVID has shut down in-person learning, the mental health of my children has drastically decreased as a result of not in school learning. The isolation, the sense of community has caused despondency, depression, clinical anxiety, self-harm, and suicidal ideation, which we are trying to address through counseling and other means. I plead with you to consider the tragedy of our middle and high schoolers in this most impressionable social period of their life, and to realize that our teens, the pandemic they are facing is not COVID, but it is anxiety, depression, self-harm, and suicide. There, according to what I can tell on the Clark County website, there have been 0 deaths of children between ages of 0 to 19, I believe.
Shannon, excuse me, we've reached time, but thank you so much for sharing. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up is Stephanie Tynan.
Is it okay if my video is off?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. My name is Stephanie Tynan. My address is 2214 Broadway Street, Vancouver, Washington, 98663. Good evening, Vancouver Public School board members, administration, and all community members, as well as colleagues. I am an elementary teacher for our district. I have firsthand experience of what it's like to be a teacher, and firsthand experience of what it's been like since March 13th when our schools were shut down. And overall, it's been a disaster. And I know that we all can find positives. I definitely can. But overall, teaching 20 kids from a screen 5 days a week is draining, and it's unhealthy for them and for our teachers. Engagement is extremely low overall with the distance learning model. I know none of us want to put our kids in danger, but students are already learning in our buildings right now, and parents can still make the choice to have their kids continue remotely. We need to safely transition children to learning in our classrooms again and keep families and teachers in mind. But if in-person learning is not a route that some of them can take, accommodations need to be made for them without difficulties and challenges. And in addition to safety, I have concerns about the lack of support that teachers have and the disregard of our time currently and in the foreseeable future. It is expected of us to transition to teaching students in person again, so we need time to prepare to do that. If plans are made for us, we need the people making the plans to think about how it affects us, because I don't think they do. wholeheartedly. I urge you to consider creating early release days prior to the hybrid start dates so that we have time to prepare outside of our teaching to change to a new proposed learning model. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Shay Fazzolari, but we're not finding you in the attendee list to move you over to panelist.
I've got a text out to her. So hopefully we'll find out. She's there.
Does she have a phone number that she's listed?
That's what I'm going to try and see. Hold on. She says it's under her name. Hold on one second. Oh, it's under her phone number. I will chat it. I'll put it in the chat.
Thanks, Kathy. We'll pull that up as soon as we get it in the chat. We don't have that number in the attendee list unless she's dialing in on an extension.
Let me just double check.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience while we figure this one out.
Yep, sorry.
We have one telephone number. We're going to go ahead and promote. We're not certain that that is Ms. Fazzolari, but we'll find out as soon as we promote.
Yeah.
Hello, Shay.
Hi.
Is
Can
this
you hear
Shay?
me? Yes, this is Shay Fazzolari. Can you hear me?
Yes, please start with your full name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is Shay Fazzolari. My address is 13211 Northwest 33rd Avenue, Vancouver, 98685. And I will apologize in advance that I thought this was a question and answer. I did not realize that I should have made it more of a speech. So I will do my best. Thank you for the time. I have not had the opportunity of seeing what Dr. Webb proposed yesterday, but I will start with the fact that we have had over 300 days to prepare for returning to school, regardless whether it was full-time, half days, hybrid. As parents, we have seen nothing that is shown to get our older kids. I have a son in high school, a senior at Skyview. privately held businesses made changes within days or weeks to reopen their businesses after they were shut down. So I don't feel like it is unrealistic for us to expect the schools to have something in place. I know the union is there to support the teachers. I don't know who supports the children and the kids, if it is the board and the administration, or if the board and the administration support both. But I do know that the parents and the kids feel like we have no voice whatsoever. I do have a question of whether the union has officially had teachers vote or take surveys about wanting to or being willing to return to the classroom, and what percentage was in favor of returning. I don't know how to find that information out. As far as getting a vaccine, if that's what it takes to get my son back in school, then I am all for it. However, I know that Fred Meyer, every grocery store has been operating the entire time without vaccines, and they are not just dropping dead in the aisle. Sorry if that sounds a little bit rude, but I can go to Fred Meyer, Barnes & Noble, craft stores, fitness facilities. My son can work in a pizza place, but he cannot attend school. The district has reported an increase in students who are failing, but I feel like that number is not accurate, because more would be failing if the expectations, I feel like, are lower than they would be if they were in person. The teachers, I know, are trying very hard to work with students, but they are going at a slower pace. They are allowing late work. And I know my son has not done a research paper in over a year. There is no way that many of these seniors are going to be prepared for college. They have essentially will have missed a year and a half of in-person learning. Their grades have plummeted. They are seeking mental health in record numbers. There have been suicides, and our governor, Dr. Fauci, all are saying that our kids are better off in school. That's it. I thank you for your time, and I hope my son gets to return to school before the end of the year, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, that is it for citizen comments. Thank you to everyone who shared your comments. I also want to take a note. The board has received a lot of communication over the last couple of weeks, and we appreciate hearing from everybody in the community. I will say that this is my 12th day as board chair and my 12th day responding to emails, and it's been a busy 12 days. So if you haven't received a response yet, one is coming, but they are being read. We are all reading all of the emails that you are sending. So thank you for that. Now on to our next item on the agenda, which is approval of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes from August 11th regular meeting and 2 special meetings, August 18th and 25th. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Sorry. Thank you, Tracy. And do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
Kathy.
We will go ahead and vote. Director Banfield.
Can I interrupt? I just have a quick question about one of the agenda. Sorry, Kyle. There was an item included in the agenda, the posted agenda, that has to do with carpet at MLK. And I just wanted to point out something and ask a quick question. The rationale mentions a contract being approved on January 15th. It's a typo. I think it means January 14th. And then my question is, the contract was approved on January 14th. I just want to clarify, because I don't remember this being on our workshop agenda in December, but it was also a few days before winter break, and it's possible I just don't remember. I don't remember talking about this, so I just wanted to ask a quick question.
Okay.
Because the work has been finished, this is not a new contract, correct?
That is correct. And are we talking about the minutes or an action item later in the agenda?
I'm talking about, oh, I'm sorry, are we doing minutes?
Yes.
I'm sorry. It has been that kind of week. I told my second period I'd see them on Friday today. I mean, I'd see them.
It's all good. I get it.
Wendy,
I'm going to hold off on that idea or that question. Thank you, Dr. Webb.
thank you. Okay, so let's go back to voting on the approval of minutes from August. Director Banfield.
Motion to approve, sorry.
Okay. Director Barrows.
Approve.
Director Decker.
Approve.
Director Smith.
Approve.
And I also approve. So next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Item number.
I'll second it.
Yeah, that I was confused. I'm sorry.
I apologize. I'll get my rhythm here. So would you like the clarification, Wendy?
I have a question about an item here.
Thank you.
About the carpet at MLK. Again, there's a date there that I think is a typo that should say January 14th. My question is just, this isn't a new contract. This is just because the work was finished, correct?
That is correct. This is a routine item. This is just releasing the retainage payment. Typically, if it were a new item, that would come to workshop. Aaron tells me that was on the workshop agenda in December too.
Okay, thank you.
I vaguely remember something, Wendy, about talking about carpeting.
Carpeting, okay, I just could not remember that. Thank you.
It looks familiar to me, but is there any more questions or comments on this consent agenda? Okay, well, let's go to vote. Director Banfield.
All right, approve.
Director Barrows.
Approve.
Director Decker.
Approve.
Director Smith.
Approve.
Okay, thank you. All approved. I also vote to approve. Next on our agenda is regular business. Item I. The recommendation to conduct a first reading to adopt revised policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business and quorum in the 1000 series board of directors.
We have a series of first readings for the board to consider tonight relative to revisions to board policy. Previously, the board has reviewed this at your December workshop. The first item is a recommendation to revise policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business and quorum. Washington law prohibits public entities from requiring a member of the public to register a name or other information as a condition precedent to his or her attendance at a public meeting. The district policy is updated to clarify this requirement for in-person meetings. And unless there are questions or comments, we'll waive the reading and bring this back for board action on February 9th.
Great, thank you. The next item is a recommendation to conduct a first reading to adopt revised policy 3510, associative student bodies in the 3000 series.
The district's policy and procedure are revised to comply with House Bill 1660, which was enacted in the 2020 legislative session. It was an act relating to the participation of students who are low income in extracurricular activities. And again, unless there are questions or comments, we'll waive the reading and bring this back to you for board action on February 9th.
Thank you. Next up is recommendation to conduct the first reading to adopt revised policy 5271, reporting improper governmental action, whistleblower protection in the 5000 series personnel.
The proposed policy will closely align the district's content with the requirements of Chapter 42.41 RCW, the Local Government Whistleblower Protection Act. Closer alignment will ensure that in the event of a dispute, the district's policy and procedure will be relied upon rather than statute. The proposed revisions provide greater protection for the district in the areas of administrative hearing costs and civil penalties or removal authority for district officers or employees found to have retaliated. The proposed revisions also set a one-year timeline for filing a complaint and create updated definitions of good faith and gross waste of funds. Again, unless there are questions or comments, we'll waive the reading and bring this back to the board for action on February 9th.
Thank you very much. The last policy is a recommendation to conduct a first reading to adopt revised policy 6112, rental or lease of district real property in the 6000 series, management support.
A district may rent, lease, or permit the occasional use of surplus real property owned or lawfully held by the district to any person, corporation, or government entity. The law requires the district to include provisions that permit the recapture of the surplus property if needed for school purposes. The law was recently amended to also prohibit recapture if district property is leased or rented for affordable housing purposes. The district's policy is updated to include the recapture provisions and the exceptions. Once again, unless there are questions or comments, we'll waive the reading and bring this back to you for board action on February 9th.
Okay, thank you. The next item is recommendation for adoption of resolution number 872, unlimited tax obligation bonds 2021. This was reviewed in our December workshop. Do I have a motion?
This is Kathy. I'll motion.
I will let Dr. Webb go ahead and detail first.
Oh, sorry.
It's short and sweet. As the district prepares to make the fourth and final bond sale authorized by voters on February 14, 2017 bond election for $458 million, the board must act to formally authorize this bond sale. It's a recommendation that the board of directors adopt resolution number 872, authorizing the sale of unlimited tax obligation bonds in 2021 in an amount not to exceed $93 million.
Now, do I have a motion?
This is Kathy. I will motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Wendy. I'll second.
Are there any questions or comments? We did discuss this in December. Okay. That said, we will take a vote. Director Banfield?
Approve.
Director Barrows?
Approve.
Director Decker?
Approve.
And Director Smith?
Approve.
And I also vote to approve. The motion passes. Lastly, recommendation to accept purchase agreement number 2018-049 classroom edition at Salmon Creek Elementary School.
On January 2nd, 2019, a contract was awarded to 2KG Contractors, Portland, Oregon, for a 2 classroom edition at Salmon Creek Elementary School. This project is part of the 2017 bond program. The fund source is the Capital Projects Fund. It's a recommendation that the board of directors accept a contract with 2KG Contractors in Portland, Oregon for the construction of 2 classroom edition at Salmon Creek Elementary School in the final amount of $1,119,559.37 plus Washington State sales tax. And that final payment be made for the project except retainage.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Have a second?
Kamara, this is Kamara, second.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question about this one too. Again, it says on the agenda January 2nd, 2019, which I think might be an incorrect date. I don't remember having a meeting on January 2nd, 2019. My question is that we had the same item on our agenda in July 14th, like word for word the same item. Is there a reason why we're voting on it again?
This is actually accepting completion of the project and releasing payment for the project being completed.
Okay, but when I look back at the item agenda at our July meeting, it was exact same wording. So that the work had been completed and this was the final payment back in July.
I'll have to research the July conflict, but going back to the January 2nd date, remember that's when the contract was originally awarded, the bids were received. So it may not coincide with some of the timing that you're thinking of, but that July question, I'll have to go back and research. And so I don't have an answer for that right this second.
Okay, and at risk of asking a really dumb question, if we approve this a second time, the same exact thing, that doesn't mean we're double spending or anything like that, right? So I just want to make sure that if we're voting on something twice, that's not causing some sort of complication or anything.
It would not. Nevertheless, we'll verify to ensure that there is no redundancy in acting on the same item in July and acting on the item tonight.
All right, thank you.
Wendy, are you comfortable moving forward?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take a vote. Director Banfield.
All right, approve.
Director Barrows.
Approve.
Director Decker.
Approve.
Director Smith.
Approve.
And I also approve. That is it for our regular business items. Next up, we have our superintendent's report, which I believe is why we have so many attendees tonight.
550.
So Steve, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's go ahead and launch. Before I begin the formal presentation, I've got a few remarks and kindly ask the board to hold all questions until the very end of the presentation. Some have heard me say the following before, but given the context tonight, it bears repeating. Public schools, teachers and staff, superintendents and school boards across the nation have been asked to do the impossible, to deliver a high-quality education to all students while ensuring the health and wellness of our children, families, and employees, and to do our part in containing community spread of COVID-19. Pandemic-related revenue shortfalls and a largely inadequate national response to this crisis have impacted both public institutions and private businesses. The vital role of schools in managing the pandemic has been used by some people to politicize and polarize. The resulting conflict has demoralized and frustrated many educators, including me. So I get it. I feel our collective pain this evening. Nevertheless, we must shape a path forward to providing some in-person support for our students this school year. I fully recognize that miracles have been worked in Vancouver Public Schools, and I'm so grateful, so deeply grateful to our students, staff, and families. Unfortunately, context matters. Students with the greatest need are doing less well in remote learning. And according to recent stories published in national media all across the country, school districts from coast to coast have reported the number of students failing classes has risen by as many as 2 or 3 times, with English language learners and disabled and disadvantaged students struggling the most. As the board knows, the same trend is true for Vancouver Public Schools and other Clark County districts. Those students farthest from educational justice are being impacted disproportionately by the pandemic and remote learning in spite of our very best efforts. Additionally, isolation and loneliness caused by the pandemic and remote learning has created unintended anxiety and depression for too many of our nation's children and youth. After more than 10 months of learning about COVID-19 and the precautionary measures that reduce transmission, we can and must reopen schools in a sensible way. Public health experts say we can do it safely, consistent with the updated December 16th Washington Department of Health guidance for schools and Governor Inslee's proclamation. We now know much more about the major sources of transmission, COVID-19 risk to children and youth, and the efficacy of CDC recommended risk mitigation strategies. Both Governor Inslee and State Superintendent Chris Reykdal have strongly encouraged school districts to begin reopening immediately with the necessary safety protocols in place. Along with other county districts, we continue to consult with Clark County Public Health. All county districts plan to scale K-5 hybrid schedules over the next several weeks. To be clear, Clark County Public Health supports those plans. I know some are advocating for a delay until vaccinations are complete for all K-12 employees. As indicated in yesterday's press release, Evergreen Public Schools and Vancouver Public Schools have sent a letter to Governor Inslee asking for K-12 employees to be classified as essential workers and to be included in the phase 1B2 category scheduled for vaccination during the month of February. We join a growing chorus of districts and professional associations, including WEA and the Washington State School Directors Association, to expedite and prioritize vaccinations of all K-12 employees as soon as practical as an added layer of protection for students, staff, and families. But to be clear, according to OSPI and the Washington Department of Health, mass vaccination is not a condition to reopen schools. Next slide. This slide presents the December 16th Washington Department of Health new guidance for providing in-person learning. As of last week, Clark County was in the moderate level. Today's reported data places the county in the high level category. Regardless of whether or not there is a continuing post-New Year surge in new cases per 100,000, this updated guidance allows school districts to begin hybrid learning grades K-5 in the high level. So this means we will proceed with our K-5 transition regardless of what happens over the next few weeks. And I ask that the board and those in the audience read the direction that is provided in the education modality guidance. Phase in-person learning in groups of 15 or fewer students for pre-K through grade 5. If schools can demonstrate the ability to limit transmission in the school environment, add grades 4 through 5. Next slide. This slide reports the Clark County COVID-19 activity level for the last 5 weeks. 6 weeks. As of January 4th, Clark County was just below 325 new cases per 100,000. Today's data is 397 new cases per 100,000. Next slide. This slide reports the Clark County positivity rates. This data lags the COVID-19 activity levels, and the most current data is from December 13th through the 19th. That data is 9.41% positive, below the 10% target in moderate COVID-19 activity level. Next slide. This slide identifies the number of students that have received in-person learning support in Vancouver Public Schools or partner programs like Cascadia Tech since September 21 in small group pods of 10 or fewer. Approximately 2,000 Vancouver Public Schools students have received in-person support in the fall and early winter. This past week, we added another 800 plus students with the learning pods for our most at-risk and disengaged students. Next slide. This slide identifies the reported positive COVID-19 cases from July to January in Vancouver Public Schools and at work sites. This is critically important data because the new guidance states that if schools can demonstrate the ability to limit transmission in the school environment, then we should add more grades. As of January 4th, 10 students have been identified as COVID-19 positive cases. None, I repeat, none were reported as a school-based transmission case. 45 employees were identified as COVID-19 positive cases. Only 4 were reported as work-based transmission cases. We have thousands upon thousands of human interactions daily, and only 4 adult known positive case transmissions in our schools and our work sites since July of 2020. Next slide. This slide notes the unintended impacts on students due to remote learning related to student success and sense of well-being. Next slide. This data has been presented to the board previously. It's a summary table and bar graph showing the increase in middle school, high school F rates, students with at least 1 F grade for the first reporting window year over year, and the disproportionate impact on students farthest from educational justice. Unfortunately, remote learning is not working equally well for all of our students, despite the heroic work by our staff. Nearly twice as many middle school students received at least 1 F grade in this marking period year over year. High school students experienced an approximate 50% increase. Next slide. Slide 9 is pulled from a national study published by NBC News in December of 2020. The source is Mental Health America. COVID-19 is adversely affecting the mental health well-being of our nation's children. The end of this teen survey administered to youth with moderate to severe depression was 327,000. It's a fairly large N for a survey. Nearly 80% of respondents reported that loneliness or isolation was a source of their distress. Sadly, several youth suicides have occurred in Clark County during this pandemic. Next slide. Here is my recommended revised reopening timeline, which has been vetted by cabinet, principals report. We can do this. Our team has discussed the plan with VEA leaders. And as the board is aware, we slid the grades 1-2 launch dates back by 1 week from the previously released dates, given feedback from our principals. The grades 1-2 hybrid launch is January 25th. Because of this change, our elementary team recommended transitioning our kinder pods to kinder hybrid on January 19th. This timing provides a soft launch for a 5-hour hybrid day from the 3-hour small group pod day. February 1st is the launch of grades 3 through 5 hybrid, and we've not established a specific hybrid launch date in February for middle schools and March for high schools. Instead, we've linked those transitions to the parameters outlined by the Washington Department of Health. We would likely phase in grade levels with 6 and 9 coming in 1 week prior to the other grades at each respective level. WIA just released its guidance, so we need a little more time to evaluate and plan for athletics and activities. If by February 1st, the Southwest Washington region is in phase 2 of the revised Washington Safe Start Plan released last week by Governor Inslee, we would begin some 9-12 athletics and activities consistent with previously released guidance. Next slide. This slide shows the current announced Clark County School District reopening plans. The takeaway here is that all districts are moving forward with achieving K-5 hybrid learning roughly on the same trajectory, although some in different ways. For example, Camas is transitioning earlier with middle school students. Although not included on this slide, Hawkinson, Woodland, and Green Mountain are following similar timelines. Next slide. Slide 12 is the current Washington COVID-19 vaccine plan and phases released last week by Governor Inslee and the Washington Department of Health. We know this is an important part of the equation. In a recent meeting with Clark County Public Health, school nurses, health room assistants, and COVID-19 isolation room attendants at each school have been identified as A1 high-risk healthcare workers in healthcare settings. Currently, K-12 employees age 50 or over are in the B2 phase scheduled for February. K-12 employees younger than age 50 are in the B4 phase scheduled for April. There is growing advocacy sentiment in Olympia that all K-12 employees should be in the B2 phase. And just today, State Superintendent Chris Rakedahl sent a similar letter to our Secretary of Health and to Governor Inslee advocating for the collapsing of the B4 group into the B2 so that vaccinations could be expedited to scale for all K-12 employees. Locally, superintendents are partnering with Clark County Public Health to develop a more decentralized and rapid vaccination delivery system using our trained nurses under the supervision of Clark County Public Health incident management teams to administer vaccinations faster. The current clinic healthcare setting delivery system has unintentionally created a bottleneck. Points of distribution centers would be set up in several locations throughout the county, prioritizing school staff subject to vaccine supply. And I am on a working committee with Clark County Public Health to develop the logistics and the plan to do just that. Next slide. I'm going to turn this over to Mike and team to highlight 3 areas: program operations and PPE and safety. And then I have a few closing remarks before we'll entertain questions or comments from the board. So Mike, you're up.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. Central office leaders and elementary principals have collaborated in identifying a plan to best meet the needs of students as we move to hybrid modes of learning. Family choice, equity, and teacher workload are all supported through this model. District staff and principals will survey parents to determine a parent choice for either hybrid or remote learning for their children. The survey will go out to parents on the afternoon of Wednesday, January 12th. In this plan, the survey will close on Monday, January 18th in the evening. If parents do not respond, principals will be following up with a phone call to the families, much like they have done previously. Principals will develop classes and staffing assignments for their hybrid and remote learners based upon the responses they receive from their parents. The survey results will inform principals on how to assign staff to meet the needs of students in hybrid learning and full remote instruction at each respective elementary school. So the principals will be working directly with their staff and identifying how to best meet the needs of the families as they have made that choice. When a school has insufficient numbers to support a full remote classroom, the principal will work with the district to determine solutions to meet their remote learning needs. Potential solutions may include assigning fully remote learners from 2 or more schools to 1 full remote teacher, assigning students to a class with a split grade levels at their current school, Providing the option to attend VVLA, Vancouver Virtual Learning Academy, is certainly a choice. Parents will be encouraged to remain with their choice of learning option for the remainder of the school year. However, principals will have the flexibility to make changes as needed depending upon space availability and public health guidance that we are following. We are committed to providing a full remote option for the remainder of the school year. However, we have a responsibility to balance class sizes and teacher workloads, which may result in teacher reassignments. Human Resources will work with VEA leadership to ensure staffing aligns with the 2021 Memorandum of Understanding and our current contract language under the collective bargaining agreement. The model will provide choice to instructional mode to families, be that hybrid or full remote. It will provide collaboration between building administrators and their staff. It will provide equitable access to instructional mode that best supports the needs of students and families, be that hybrid or full remote. And we believe it will reduce teacher workload. Deborah and our elementary principal representatives with us this evening will be sharing additional details about the hybrid and full remote educational programs that we're recommending. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Deborah.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there for this conversation. And I just want to say I have boundless gratitude to the small principal work group that you're going to hear from tonight. They've put in countless hours on this plan. And then that same gratitude extends to our entire principal group, because everything that the small work group put together, we brought back to the larger group and got their input. In some cases, we got their course correction. We were able to get to a place where we're all in the same place and have the same, obviously the same goals and the same direction. So I am going to ask each of our 6 principals to chime in a little bit from some aspect of this plan. You've met them before, but I want you to know that Bobby Genty from Marshall, Heath Engelbeck from Salmon Creek, Jennifer Bleckschmidt from Eisenhower, Adley Copeland from King, Patrick Connors at Chinook, and Matt Kaufman at Ogden are the ones who are going to talk to us tonight. So Bobby and Heath, would you be willing to start?
Absolutely. Thank you, Deborah. I will reiterate a few of the things that Mike had spoken about earlier. What we knew was important was that we still had parent choice in whether or not our families were full remote or moving to our hybrid situation. So as he said, there will be another survey going out, because what we know is the data we had from our previous survey is outdated and from September. So we'll be looking at our newest data to determine what those hybrid and full remote classrooms will look like. Our parents will be asked to commit to either a hybrid or remote learning for the remainder of the school year. This will help with our teachers not having to transition students in and out of classrooms and out of settings. Parent choice will drive our building decisions and regarding how our staffing will be distributed. So based upon what those survey results show, that will determine how we staff our buildings for the remainder of this school year. Keith?
And as we're looking at that data, we may have to, determine if a combination class is needed. But our number one goal is to minimize disruption to the greatest extent possible. And that also includes if students need to move to a different teacher, that also is going to be part of our process when we're looking at minimizing disruptions. And lastly, we have class sizes. We're going to continue to make sure that we change. They're going to be based on the class sizes and current public health guidance. As our families come to us, as they always will with specific situations that may need some principal support and care to help put kids where they need to be.
Thank you. And one of the things we have worked from as a given in all of the hours that the work group spent and also the hours with the greater principal group is that this is a collaborative effort. It's principal and teacher team. That's how our principals work. That's how it all works well. And Jennifer and Natalie are going to speak a little bit to one of those collaborative areas, FAB.
Good afternoon, or good evening at this point. I'm going to speak briefly about our fitness and arts block schedule. Building principals will collaborate with fitness and arts block teachers to create a building schedule or a building arts block schedule that best supports the students at their schools. And Jennifer's going to elaborate a little on that.
You're still muted, Jen.
Thank you. Basically, what we're going to do, every building is unique and has unique needs. So we will work with our arts block teachers to consider those needs and the students' needs in the process. Obviously, we have additional variables that we're considering as we plan for arts block. We will have options for in-person or synchronous while those arts block teachers are back in the building. So we plan to meet with them and start working through that process.
Okay, thanks, Jen. And just, did I interrupt you, Jennifer? No, okay. Just briefly, Patrick and Matt, one or both of them will speak. You have seen you've seen the hybrid schedule. The larger schedule that you've seen before didn't change, but they're going to speak to some small edits, I believe. Patrick or Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. One of the issues that's come up when we took into consideration the FAB or Fine Arts Block schedule and the daily schedule for students was the safety concerns of staff and students and looking to meet their needs. One of the changes that's been made or proposed to the schedule would be that teachers' preps would take place after the students leave for the day, beginning at 2 o'clock, to account for some of the changes that may need to take place for FAB to be successful. Our daily schedule, as proposed earlier on, would be 8:30 to 1:50 Monday and Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, Monday and Tuesday being the A pod, Thursday and Friday being B pod. Wednesdays will be a remote only day for students as well. Those times are specific to 19 of the elementary schools, and then the Minnehaha and Lincoln schedule is likely later. And Matt is going to talk a little bit about our lunch and recess schedules.
Yes, under this model, there's obviously other things during the day, lunch and recess, that need to be scheduled. And as we've shared before, this model really provides a lot of flexibility for buildings to make those decisions at the building level. So based on programs that you would have, layout of the school, number of playgrounds, lunch schedules and recess schedules will be made at the building level.
Okay, thanks, guys. As you see, there is an enormous flexibility at the building level to meet the needs of the students in that site. I don't have to tell you, but we have such variance among our schools. We have tiny and we have very large. And we have, programs that are at some sites and not at others. There are many different variables, and we know that, and we honor that, we embrace that. Those are the decisions that principals and teams will make in their buildings. What works best for you? As Matt said, or Patrick said, we opened up that last hour of the day as a possibility for planning time. We are not dictating this. We're simply saying, each school will look at its synchronous and asynchronous arts offerings. How does this work best? In a very small school where an entire grade level is 2 classes, that will look different than at our schools that have 6 kindergarten teachers. So I don't say that to obfuscate. I say that to say each school will be looking at its own needs and making sure they've done best for their students. So that's the part we wanted to bring to you tonight. Mike, more from you?
I don't believe so. I think we're going to transition to Brett and Kathy to talk a bit about operations. As you would imagine, we are scaling nutrition services and scaling transportation services. And we will need to recall some of our affected SEIU employees as we begin to expand in our hybrid schedule. Brett?
Dr. Webb, I think I'm starting first, so I'll kick off the Brett and Kathy part of this presentation. So as the board knows, the district leadership and human resources have monthly meetings with all our labor leaders. There are monthly labor management meetings. But with the pandemic, that has moved up to oftentimes weekly or daily or whatever is needed. So we are in constant communication with our labor leaders. Our labor leaders have direct lines to our personal cell numbers, let alone our work numbers, and whatever it takes to get across the finish line, we will work together on this to address emerging issues as they come up. As Dr. Webb said, we have some of our SEIU members are still furloughed. And so we plan on, if we move forward with this current plan, we would be calling back our food services employees. We have 2 new school kitchen sites that have never been set up. So some of the schools, we would call back their food services workers earlier. On January 13th, we would notify them. We would also then notify the rest of our food service workers for January 14th to return and they would be returning back to work. Our food services workers will be coming back on January 21st and January 22nd in preparation for students increased number of students on our campus. So we have 130 nutrition services employees for elementary, middle, and high schools that will be recalled through this process. We have worked with the labor leaders to inform them of our desire to do this if we move forward with this current plan. We also, when we bring back any of our employees who have been furloughed, our employees are being instructed in school safety protocols for COVID-19. It is mandatory that all of our employees go through our Safe School modules that talk about COVID-19 and safety protocols that we have to adhere to in labor and industry standards, Washington Department of Health, Clark County Public Health. All those things are considered in our training so that people are aware of what to expect when they come into the schools. We also have our principals working with those new staff members coming back in to make sure that they understand what those protocols are also. These food services folks will be setting up our kitchens and possibly will be supporting other work as needed as their memorandum of understanding guidelines allow for. As far as bus drivers and transportations, we will continue to bring in additional hours. We are working with labor leaders for our Employee Services Union, SEIU, and we will be working with adding at least calling back 3 members back when we start looking in transportation with mechanic and bus service worker and some other folks that we do need as we gear up. Other drivers will be added based on the routing staffing needs. So more kids come back. We know who our kids are. We'll be adding additional drivers in time to make sure we're transporting our kids to school. And as far as another need we know we have, and it's been spoken to tonight, are the certificate and classified substitutes. So Human Resources has been very busy. We are posting for certificated and classified substitute in a variety of locations through the district website. We use Twitter, Facebook. WorkSource is with unemployment services and school reader boards. And our labor leaders, we requested their assistance in getting it out on their own webpage, noting that we would like to hire additional substitutes, and they have been great and are going to be doing that for us. We are interviewing weekly. We are hiring weekly. Right now, our total number of substitutes available for certificated staff are 220. We have an additional 31 long-term substitutes currently in place. We also are training any of our substitutes. We are training our substitutes to take on long-term assignments. So 20 have been fully trained on our Canvas landing page use, our synchronous and asynchronous teaching, streaming live lessons to students who are remote, and also the COVID-19 Safe School modules have been trained. This week, we are going to be training an additional 36 substitutes, certificated substitutes, in using those tools so that they too are also ready to come on board should we need them for long-term positions. And our classified focus for hiring, we are focusing on paraeducators. We have active 138 substitute paraeducators, but like everybody else, they have needs with their families. And so with schools not in session, they have children at home. So that is prohibitive for some of those folks to come in and substitute for us. So when kids get back to school, that will free up time for many of our substitutes to return to work. We will also be focusing on hiring additional substitute bus drivers. We currently have 17 substitute bus drivers, and we want to increase that. And again, we will continue to keep all the modules for safety training up on Safe Schools, as well as how to do live streaming and synchronous and asynchronous lessons, as well as Canvas landing page on training modules on Safe Schools. So folks will have that. And the question has come up around the mandatory training for our employees, and how do our employees know what to do if they need some additional resources or supports around any kind of COVID-19 issues. We have, every one of our schools have 2 COVID coordinators, the principal or associate principal, but they're both administrators. So there are 2 COVID coordinators, site coordinators at each school. There are guidelines that we follow that, as I said, we're in compliance with Clark County Public Health, Washington Department of Health, Labor and Industry, CDC, OSPI, and the Governor proclamations. We are in compliance with all those. Principals will train staff as they return. They will share the protocols that we have in place for reporting any kind of COVID-19 safety concerns. So there is a flow chart that will be posted around the building for staff. It will be sent to staff. Principals will be training their folks on this. So should there be any concerns around any kind of safety violations or PPE needs, the personal protection needs that might be needed, they are the people who are going to be taking care of that. If there's any health room annex needs, there's specific protocols our staff are following. Our principals are in charge of that health room annex. And then any kind of safety protocol concerns. These site coordinators, let's say a staff member says, well, I talked with my site coordinator and I really didn't feel like I got this resolved. Then we have the next step for them is to contact our safety district COVID-19 safety officer. And those are Lindsay Rogers and Nicole Del Tasso, who you've heard from before. So I'm going to turn it over to Brett at this point.
All right, thanks, Kathy. As Kathy kind of previewed, we will be changing the way in which we provide our meals to our students, beginning with the expansion of the kindergarten school day. With those students going through the lunch hour, we will have an expanded version of grab and go that's delivered to those elementary schools for those kindergartners for those 3 days when it's simply only kindergartners still in the hybrid schedule. When we transition the following week, January 25th, we will begin preparing meals in each of the executing the meals. Some of our meals are delivered from a production kitchen to a satellite kitchen in elementary schools, but we will operate as we normally would in those kitchens at every elementary school starting on the 25th with the full complement of our staff under this plan. Transportation would be an expansion of our current model where we are routing specifically for the students that we're transporting on the hybrid model. So we would expect a slight expansion of the current transportation routing when we add 1st and 2nd grade, and then we would see another more dramatic expansion when we add 3rd through 5th grade. What I would emphasize on transportation is right now with kindergarten runs and some high-risk pods, most of our buses, I believe, are below 5 students per bus. And so even when we add 1st and 2nd graders, we should be able to separate the students very effectively. The other safety measures that we have already in buses, and we will continue, is we will have clean masks available as the student enters the bus, kind of the first step of that walkway into the bus. They will have access to a clean mask and hand sanitizers before they even touch the mask. So we feel really good about our preparations on the busing in terms of making sure students' first contact with our staff and other students is as safe as possible. Moving on to kind of some other broader PP&E and HVAC safety considerations. One of the things that we've heard a lot of curiosity and concern around is around air quality within and specifically air circulation within our classroom. So I'm happy to report we've done an exhaustive assessment of all of our classrooms. And what we know is that whether a classroom has an exterior door or windows to the outside or not, is not the primary mode in which we provide quality air in that classroom. We rely on our HVAC systems to circulate air as well as condition it in the summer for cooling and heating in the winter. But they also do a refresh of that air throughout the day on a cyclical basis, which we can monitor on our control systems. So we have a team of HVAC technicians as well as building operators that are constantly aware of what's happening within their building as it relates to those HVAC systems. And from a practical perspective, although outside windows have their own merit, we never would rely on outside windows or doors to provide for air quality, because simply put, in our climate, those things are closed the majority of the school year. So we must rely on HVAC whether those exist or not. We do have some classrooms in our oldest building, I'm sure it's our oldest building, that we have identified that they do not have an HVAC system that cycles air. And we are purchasing standalone air filtration or air quality equipment to put in each one of those classrooms. So they'll have a standalone system to make sure that the air is on par with the classrooms that are serviced by our HVAC system. In terms of PPE, I know we've talked at length in going back to August, I think a several-hour conversation on this, so I won't go through every measure of safety and PPE, but what I will highlight is our safety officers that are specifically trained in workplace safety and are taking the lead on some of our COVID measures have done a job analysis of all of our jobs and compared it to the Department of Labor and Industry standards and the CDC standards, as Kathy highlighted. And we're confident that we have the appropriate key PPE for each of job type that we have based on that analysis. To be compliant, we have I think pretty robust inventories in the warehouse that our buildings are able to access on an as needed basis. So we feel really, really confident about all of the safety measures that we've been working on and briefing you all, starting in the summer. So with that, I think Kathy hit most of the other issues around when we do have breaches to that, what is the staff's recourse. And so with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Dr. Webb.
Thanks, Mike, Deborah, our principals, and Brett and Kathy. I want to provide a few closing remarks and then turn it back to you, Madam Chair, for questions and comments from the board. In summary, I understand that there are some who are advocating for a full reopening immediately. Grades K through 12, every student, every day. Your voices have been heard. Unfortunately, the current Washington Department of Health guidance does not permit this given Clark County current metrics. I also understand that there are some who are advocating for the district to remain in remote learning for the balance of the school year, or at a minimum, until all staff and students receive vaccinations. Your voices have also been heard. The evidence and science indicate that schools are not a significant source location of COVID transmission so long as students and staff adhere to the CDC COVID mitigation strategies, socially distance, wear masks, wash hands, clean and sanitize spaces. Vaccinations at scale are an added layer of protection, creating herd immunity to respond to community-based transmission. And what the data demonstrates in Vancouver Public Schools is that the two primary sources of COVID transmissions are in the community and in the home. Our hybrid reopening plan and schedule is both safe and sensible, and it's supported by Clark County Public Health and consistent with the Washington Department of Health guidance. We're relying on the experts, scientists, epidemiologists, and public health professionals. And they've determined that this course of action is safe. Our children and youth need to be in school, and they need to be in school as soon as possible, consistent with the Washington Department of Health guidance. This plan achieves that outcome while providing equitable choice for those families that select all remote, empowering principals and staff to deliver on solutions for children and families in their school, while addressing teacher workload concerns previously expressed. Our team will respond to questions now, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I will open up the floor to board members. I know we have lots of questions out there.
I'll start. My understanding, because a lot of my questions did get answered, but it sounds like some of the questions that I had were what is lunch going to look like, and recess and things like that. It sounds like a lot of the those decisions on whether lunch is, in the classrooms, whether students transition to lunch in a lunchroom, a lot of those are going to be building level decisions. So we might not know exactly what that looks like. Is that correct? Am I correct in understanding?
Tracy, I would just like to say, and a principal may want to answer that for his or her building, so please jump in, principals. But it isn't that we can't know it, it's that it won't be identical at every site. So
right, that's what I'm asking, is that there's not a standard, all students are going to be eating in their classrooms or students will be eating in the lunchroom. That's going to be building level decisions, correct?
That's correct, Tracy. It depends on the size of the school, whether we have spacing available and the time that it would allow to have students transitioning through spaces. So it'll really be building dependent based on the size of the school.
Thank you, Bobby. We made a plan last fall when this was brought forth to staff to provide for students eating in the classroom. And that is still an existing plan. That is something we can follow for those schools who can provide that 6-foot distance and have small numbers of kids. They may choose something different.
And actually, Tracy, we've been prepared for that piece of it long ago. So we're good.
That's a concern that I've kind of repeatedly heard from teachers, is the concern about being in the classroom when they're 10 to 15 kids all take off their masks and are eating for that length of time. So
gotcha.
And one of the considerations we have to look at is how many students we're going to have based off the numbers that come out, who's going to be remote only and who's going to come back in person. And that's why it's going to be so important for our families to complete those surveys too, so we have an accurate number as we get prepared to come back.
So on piggybacking on what you just mentioned, Patrick, one suggestion I have, and maybe you've already decided to do this, is when those surveys are sent out, they should be sent out through the teachers' emails, because I know a number of my friends have said, if I get something from VPS, sometimes I look at it, sometimes I don't. If I get something from the school, sometimes I look at it, sometimes I don't. If I get it from my kid's teacher, I read it right away. So given the importance of getting responses to this survey, even if all the teachers do is forward it, I think you will get a much better response if it's sent out underneath this kid's teacher's email address.
And Kathy, I would add to that we've discussed that as a principal group about that going out at a district level, but also pushing it out at a building level. And then along with that, follow up from principals and other staff at the school for those families who haven't responded, so that we do get all the data back that we need to have.
And we've found that the less response we hear from families, because we work through a cycle, and there's so many families we're reaching out to. We really do have to start with the district level to get all of that out and compile all of that data to start forming our AB. However, when it gets down to it, we do start calling, and that's when we, either principals themselves, paraeducators, and finally teachers, we don't want to overwhelm teachers, but that personal connection that they have with the teacher, that's exactly what we found. So there's kind of 3 layers that we've worked through in the past that we've found success with, which echoes kind of what you're hearing.
Okay.
I had another question as we're talking about the survey. And it's my understanding, like, I want to just clarify and make sure that it's clear that the goal is to, or I guess the students that opt to stay in remote learning full time will have a remote only teacher versus they're not going to, their hybrid teacher is not going to, one day a week have that instruction with, they will have like live remote teaching 4 days a week.
Yes, remote only students will become a class of remote only with a teacher.
Okay, good, because I know that was a big concern for the kids that are staying remote only. Is there any, this might be an HR question, is there any awareness of how many teachers might need to be remote only, like our high risk teachers that I'm just wondering if we know like how the numbers might start to be fleshed out?
Sure, Tracy, what the, once we move forward with some additional planning tomorrow, principals are going to be surveying their own staff because they are staffing their remote sections and they're going to be staffing their hybrid sections. And in the memorandum of understanding with VEA, there is a clear outline in section E that talks about how you staff the remote only with teachers who would like to have that, kind of the priority. We had a conversation with VEA about that again today. And what we said is we will look at every avenue for teachers who would like to go remote to see where we can place folks. It will just depend on the sections we have available. And we have teachers who are going out for maternity leave that have to be out. So it's going to look different everywhere. But once we get the data in from all the schools as far as who's remote and who's hybrid, principals staff that, then we will look at, do we have any other needs to be able to move some of these teachers maybe from another building to move them into a remote for a building that needs a remote teacher. So like I told VEA, we are going to look at everything possible to get everybody where they would like to be, but I just can't guarantee we can have it all.
Okay, thank you.
I want to say thank you to everybody that worked on this. And also everybody that's going to be working on this, because this is heavy lift between now and the 25th, and then again and again. There are so many moving pieces. I know that most people that have never worked in a school building don't understand how many moving pieces there are. And when you're talking about basically now arranging 2 buildings within one, the remote building and the hybrid building, now you've just basically doubled all the moving parts, and it's insane. And I feel so lucky that you guys have all worked so hard and are willing to continue to work hard. I am so happy that we are letting a lot of these decisions be made at the building level, where obviously the teachers and the staff and the principals, they all know their community better. They know how their building works. They know where on a good day the snags come up and they can do it. So I just love it. I'm glad that we have a remote solution. Thank you. That has weighed very heavy on my heart since the kindergartners went in. And I'm glad to see that we've got a solution for those kiddos, and that we're willing to work with our teachers and move them around, and that VEA is willing to move. That was my concern, is that not so much that VEA wouldn't be willing to do it, but that we might get in some sort of contractual, thing. And it sounds like everybody's gonna be flexible. I do have 2 concerns though, as far as protocol. We've gotten a couple emails from some kindergarten teachers that have said that they've sent kids to the sick room or to the nurse with a cough. I've gotten 2 emails, and that those kids' temperatures were taken and then they were sent back to the room because they didn't have a temperature. My understanding is that something like a cough is a class A. I know that the school where I teach preschool, including I teach preschool at a school, and then attached to that preschool is an elementary school, middle school, and high school. And kids are sent home when they have a cough. If it resolves itself within 24 hours, they're allowed to come back. If not, it's sort of Dr. Webb, it's the kind of the flow chart that we got from you in our briefing. And I want to make certain that everybody follows that and understands, the class A symptoms are send home symptoms. And I don't know if there's anybody to speak to that or how we can make sure that happens. But that's one of the reasons why private schools have not been super spreaders or have not had to. It's because those kids go home.
Kathy, we have, I know in our building, I have it on my phone. I live it. I have to look at it all the time. We've got it laminated. It's on the annex room. This isn't something you can memorize. And not only that, it's because it changes all the time, as we've learned. So we do have the most recent iteration. And in fact, just this morning, we were looking through it. And so we do our very best to be diligent about following what the specific protocols are on the matrix sheet.
Right.
Thanks, Jennifer. Nicole, Lindsay, I see you on this Zoom. Perhaps you can just highlight the updated flowcharts that were recently released by Clark County Public Health and then certainly distributed and shared with our team.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Webb. So I hope you guys can hear me okay. So as far as that scenario of students being sent back into the classroom, I just want to speak to that really quick. Yeah, if they do have any symptoms, students are supposed to be sent home. However, if it's caused by another condition, so if they have asthma, say, or if they were drinking their water and they just choked on their water or something, that's another scenario that I can imagine that maybe they sent the student back. But otherwise, yes, when they have symptoms, they are to be sent home. In regards to the new flowcharts from ESD 112 and Clark County Public Health, we have updated those in our COVID-19 response plan, which can be found on the website. I'm trying to think, were there major changes to it? It's pretty standard to what we've been doing so far, nothing.
Yeah, the only change between the previous flow chart and the current flow chart was integrating the 14-day quarantine to 10-day, consistent with that recent change that was issued by the CDC and then adopted by the Washington Department of Health.
Right. And so Clark County Public Health has something on their website that kind of conflicts with that 10-day versus 14-day quarantine piece that says that schools are high-risk settings and that we should quarantine for 14 days always. And so then the flow chart says you can occasionally do 10 days. So we are seeking clarification on that from the county right now.
I can share with you that the direction from Clark County Public Health is 10 days for school-based.
Right. I know that that's the flow chart that we have where I work is the 10 days. And I remember that went into effect before the Christmas holiday, I believe, the 10 days. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that a fever is not the only symptom that gets a child sent home. And when I got those emails, it was a little alarming. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then one other question I had is, we've gotten a number of questions and concerns from teachers about if they have to take sick leave because they have these symptoms as well, and and this is probably Kathy, how are we dealing with their accrued sick leave versus sick leave that they have to take because of COVID? It just seems like these are, unprecedented times, and how are we handling that?
So Kathy, in the memorandum of understanding with all our labor group, it's spelled out for staff and for labor leaders. It is very well spelled out. And Nicole Dornan in our benefits office works individually with each one of those folks to help them. The COVID-19 leaves, you can only use them once for the full amount of days. And after you've used it once, then you would have to use your own leave, which is correct. We have specific language in there. So anything that's coming up, they can get clarification from the building principal looking at the MOU. They can get clarification from the union leadership looking at the MOU. They can call. We've got all that information on our benefits page, what those benefits are to our employees and how they would access those, or they could call Nicole Dornan also and get some support. So we have a lot of support to those employees.
Great. I figured that, but I felt I needed to ask just to make sure. Thanks, Kathy.
You bet.
So I just want to touch on the situation or the example that Kathy brought up, and we've received quite a few emails over the last few months with caution or alarm. I dropped my child off at school and I saw someone outside and their mask wasn't on correct. Or the kids were gathered and they all seemed like they were 3 feet apart, not 6 feet apart. And I don't want to get into the details of all these specific scenarios, but I just wonder if, part of we want our educators to feel safe at school. We want our families to feel safe at school. And I wonder what type of training opportunity there is around, I know that we've gone over the protocols, but in terms of recourse for if you see something, what that path is. Just in the sense of, if you're uncomfortable because it seems like someone at your school isn't wearing their mask correctly, you also don't want to be selling out your colleagues. So how do we open that line of communication so people can report without throwing their colleague under the bus? Does that make sense? I just want to make sure everyone has that open channel and knows what that channel is.
Yeah, Kathy or Nicole or Brett, do you have the flow chart that speaks to reporting COVID-19 safety concerns that you can pull up and then screen share? Anyone?
Yeah, I have it. Kathy, do you want me to?
Go ahead, Nicole. I sent that to you guys. It's that blue one.
Yep.
If you could just screen share it, I think that would respond to Kyle's question.
Oh, wow, that's not even updated. Yep, just give me 1 second here.
Kyle, we actually did have something like that happen that was reported, and it was reported to the administrator, and the administrator talked to the staff member. It's just the mask wasn't on quite as it should be, and it was addressed, and it was not an issue after that.
Well, and that's, I don't anticipate anyone's doing it intentionally.
Right.
And I also don't, nobody wants to be tattling. It's just a matter of wanting to ensure everyone feels safe, and that's compliance to the protocols.
And Kyle, I would ditto what Jennifer just said. In cases that have happened at the building level, we address it with the staff without saying, of course, where anything had come from, and just to re-clarify what the expectations are for our staff.
All right, so shared with you is the kind of the chart. So essentially encouraging people to report following violations: PPE needs, COVID-19 health room annex needs, safety protocol concerns. And then the school will fill out this information so that staff know who to contact. And then, as Kathy explained earlier in the presentation,
if the safety concern is unresolved, they can report the concern to us as well. So, and then basically from there, it's a collaborative effort to address any concerns that are posed. So we definitely don't work in a silo, as everybody knows, but it's collaborative.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Kathy.
Director Banfield or Director Smith, do you have any questions or thoughts?
I have lots of thoughts, but I don't have any questions, and I'm not going to share my thoughts.
I have a lot of questions. You know, I've spent a lot of time going over the recommendations by the governor, and I have a lot of questions, and so I'll go through them. But one of my first questions is, all of the stuff that we've heard tonight seems to pertain to elementary. We haven't heard anything from middle or high school, so I'm assuming that those plans are still forthcoming, and that we'll get more information in the future on those.
That's correct.
Okay. And some of the questions that I had have already been asked and answered, and so I appreciate that. One of my frustrations with the recommendations from the governor, frankly, is that there's a lot of recommendations that seem to be a little vague or open to interpretation. There are recommendations that seem to conflict in different spots, and so I'm frustrated, not with the staff or any of the plans that have put together at this point. I'm frustrated with the governor's recommendations, frankly, because he didn't ask local officials whether or not we wanted to close in March. He just made that decision on our behalf, and now he's leaving it up to us to determine how and when it's safe to open. And the recommendations are not, frankly, as helpful as they could be, in my opinion. Nonetheless, we have these recommendations, and if we are going to reopen, and I think I support reopening and expanding in-person learning, but I think it's important that, since we have these recommendations, that we make sure we're following them faithfully and with fidelity. And it seems from the conversation we've had tonight that there's been a lot of careful planning involved, and that we are trying to follow the recommendations. But there are some things that have been presented here that either haven't addressed some parts of the recommendation or seem to not follow them as closely as I would expect. For one, the recommendations do say that when trends are increasing, or excuse me, that we should expand when trends are flat or decreasing. And with the numbers today, that does not seem to be the case. And I've shared my concerns about starting before we're ready to and before it's safe to. And the recommendations that came out just before winter, or just in December, right around winter break, the fact that the governor has put out new recommendations does not necessarily convince me that we are any more or less ready to move forward than we were in December. The timeline got moved up, and I'm not convinced, frankly, that we're ready to expand at quite the pace that we're looking at. I have questions about
Wendy, if I could interrupt, is that a question or a statement?
No, I have questions. I'm just kind of giving you some context to my question.
Okay, all right.
So we had Tracy asked about lunch and recess, and the answer given there was that we're going to give maximum flexibility to each building because there's so many variances and so many differences, and I totally understand that and don't disagree with it. But my question is, they have been given some sort of guidance when they are making those plans, right? So whether they're having lunch in the classrooms or lunch in the cafeteria, they have some guidance or some parameters that they're working around, right? So can we hear what some of those parameters are that the principals are kind of working in when they're making those decisions?
Yeah, we've all developed operational plans for return to AB long ago. And what we've done is we have vetted that with our small group of our core group in our building. with our whole staff. We go back to them, we change, we modify, we get feedback. It's very much a collaborative process. Then there's changes, of course, that come from the health department. We go back, we change, we modify. There's certain things we have not changed, but we will be reviewing all of that again, because that starts with everything from the entry of the building to the movement within the building, to dismissal, to recess, to coming in, to lunch, to back, all of it. We go through it like we did with the kindergarten team. We probably spent 2 hours physically walking through what that hybrid operational plan was. We made sure everybody knows, you know, how the temperature, I forget what it's called at the moment, but the reader works. We did it all, and we will be planning to do that again as we roll in each few grade levels, so they can physically see, this is what this looks like. Like at Ike, we will not be doing any transitions in the building. They're all outside of the building, just to kind of, you know, that's just a real easy thing to do. So every building has that level of detail, and they're updating it constantly.
My question is, though, when you're making those decisions for your building, what sort of parameters are you operating within? For example, are we, for lunchtime, if they're eating in the cafeteria, are they doing it in cohorts where they're in a small group? With recess, are they going to be separated into cohorts on the recess ground? That kind of stuff. Like, I'm assuming that's part of the conversation. But
No, for sure. What we've done is we've actually looked at the square footage of the classrooms and the number of students within each classroom. And so we've determined the 6 feet ratio and tried to have students so that their faces actually aren't facing each other when they're eating, just as another measure. And then if they're over that number, which we have one grade cohort that is, and so some of those students will be eating just outside of the classroom in the co-op area. And then as far as recess, we have a full, I mean, down to a Google Map plan of certain areas for kids to play and rotate and so on and so forth. However, and I would hope, we heard some different information from Nicole and Lindsay about potentially how that could look on the playground as well. So we've gone with the tightest of plans to ensure the most safety and keeping those kindergarten cohorts together. They're at a certain space and then we rotate. So it's very, very specific.
I appreciate that level of detail. And I don't mean to be like, I want to hear all the details of every building, but what I do think is an important part of our conversation, because we have heard so many concerns from so many people that we have gone through all of those steps. And I know everybody's invested in making sure everything's as safe as we possibly can make it. But part of that public conversation is being able to demonstrate that we've gone through all of those different steps and we considered all of those different things. So I appreciate that level of detail, Jennifer. That is helpful. One of the other things that was discussed was FAB classes. And again, it sounds like it's going to be different at every building. The governor's guidance or the state guidance does specifically state that we should not allow for activities that are considered high risk. And some PE classes or PE activities would fall into that. Some music classes, if they're singing or playing instruments like recorders, which I know are very common in elementary schools, would fall into that high risk category. So, and you mentioned that sometimes those FAB classes would happen in person and sometimes they would happen remotely. So I'm again, I know this sounds like nitpicky detail level stuff, but these are the questions that we're constantly getting asked, and people need to hear this kind of conversation to feel reassured that every detail is being attended to. So have we had conversations about what kind of activities would be happening in those in-person FAB classes?
Adley, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I spend a lot of time collaborating with my FAB teachers. And I trust them completely in their decision making as to selecting activities that fall within our guidelines, our health and safety guidelines. So I would anticipate my music teacher would be selecting musical activities that right now don't include singing, because it's been identified as an activity that's a higher risk. But how could we still address the standard that lies within that Same would be true for PE. Utilizing spaces, including outdoor spaces underneath of covered areas, the field if acceptable on a appropriate day with where the weather's cooperating, and making those adjustments. Or do we have to, it's drilling down to what is the standard, and then what activities can they do that would still fall within those safe guidelines. And so that's a lot of conversation and collaboration between the principal and the fitness arts block teachers.
And Wendy, I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt really quickly. While we're going through this, are we gonna, is each question going to be in this level of detail for each, like, because
no, not necessarily, but there are some specific things that have been raised repeatedly through emails and conversations,
right,
and comments tonight, that I think there is value to being able to answer those questions publicly to show people that we have gone to that level of thought. And
so
and
I guess the question then is, the question is regarding space, have we gone to the level of detail? Is there detailed, have we done this? Yes and no. Regarding such and such. But if we're going to walk through each of these
Tamara, with respect, I have questions that I'm going to ask them.
Okay, great.
So, and Adley, thank you for that answer. But frankly, that answer, and this is not reflective of your quality of answer, it was a little less reassuring than I was hoping. I think we need to see directions given to our FAB teachers about what is allowed and what's not allowed when rates are at a high risk level like they are right now.
So Wendy, if I can stop you for a second, one area, and it may or may not, I'm a visual person, be helpful to see one of those operational spreadsheet plans that is, I don't know how many squares long, but the section we actually did not have filled in was related to Arts Block because we really didn't know where we were going to be with that yet. So these are part of those really deep conversations that will happen when we get into the planning, because it is specific to the planning for those specific teachers. And
Sure.
we have options within that. But that plan, at least on my building, isn't complete because we just weren't there yet, but we are there now. And they have to be part of that problem solving. And that's how we've done it throughout the whole process, is they have been part of the solution within the guidelines.
And I thank you for that, Jennifer. I guess one of my concerns is that my concern is that we may not have a long enough runway. I feel like we're still figuring a lot of this stuff out, and we've announced a start date at this point. One of my concerns also, or one of the concerns that has been raised, and I share, is the number of students that those FAB teachers will be serving each day if they're serving in person, if they're teaching in-person classes, which is a significantly higher number of one-to-one contacts than a classroom teacher would be having. So when we talked about kindergarten and reopening for kindergarten, I specifically asked about access and providing KN95 masks to our kindergarten teachers. I was reassured that they would have access to them should they want them. I have a follow-up question in, are we still planning to provide KN95 masks to teachers who request them? And especially for those teachers who might be in classrooms that have additional risk because of the number of students they're seeing each day or the type of activities they're engaging in.
Brett, can you respond?
And Brett, while you're looking to respond, there was a question like this that came up actually in some of our presenters. Is there specific protective equipment that can be used for music classes? So these kind of go hand in hand. So I'll throw that in there with you too.
Sure. So I guess I'll address the KN95 first. What I would say is that I referenced the job analysis for each position and each grade band. And an example of us, I think, trying to be as responsive as possible. We looked at, for instance, kindergarten. With that being the first academic experience for those students, it was less likely that 6 feet of social distancing could be, and again, the standards from L&I don't say exclusively maintained, but consistently maintained. And so in the kindergarten space, we determined that those were, I can't remember all of the different strata within the Department of Labor and Industries, but it was a higher risk than a traditional classroom. Special ed went through an exhaustive review around how often is 6 feet breached. And so I think in terms of KN95, we've tried to provide any situation that is likely to produce a more consistent breaches to the social distancing standard with that level of protection. There could be some additional staff, and again, these would be some things that we would resolve at the building level where they have a particular sensitivity or a particular concern around their health or something. And again, I think we're in a position to be responsive to those. I wouldn't necessarily say that anybody and everybody that wants a KN95 can just come grab them, because we want to preserve the inventory for those that are called for within the labor and industry and others. But I will say we have a robust supply, so I don't anticipate that becoming a scarcity mindset. I think the way to answer Kathy's question around some of the specialty instruction, we've looked at, for instance, bilingual students and their needs to be able to watch their teacher's mouth forming the language sounds. And so what we have is, at first we had plastic shields, and then the guidance became clear that a collar underneath the plastic shields was a necessary level of reinforcement. So now we've experimented with a couple different vendors on those, and so we have a supply of those. And so I think, did you ask about music specifically though?
My question is, are we able to supply KN95 masks or whatever other appropriate PPE would be needed to staff that would have working conditions where it might be more appropriate? For example, our FAB teachers, where they're seeing way more than 15 students in one day.
And then my question was specific to the music, because that tends to be, that's where a lot of super spreading has happened, is a bit in choirs and other such things. So.
And I apologize, you guys. Adley and I are the ones speaking to FAB, and maybe we did not articulate this well enough. So I apologize. Part of that conversation that we will be having with those teachers does include, we do have teachers with health related issues and otherwise, and that is a very real factor for the number of students they see. Now, mind you, it's going to be half of those students, so it could be anywhere from 10 to 12 that they'd be seeing. But part of that conversation we're planning to have, okay, some of those people know they want to teach those kids in person, and that is okay. And some of the others may respond that, you know what, I want to do synchronous, but be on site and do that. So that's also an option. So I apologize if we did not make that clear to you, but we are trying to provide every option to serve our kids in the best way and protect our teachers while being equitable throughout that whole planning process.
And I appreciate that, Jennifer. I also wanted to jump in, Wendy, and just say the elementary principals and I have met every week. And somebody asked me one time, do you still meet with principals weekly? And I said, yes, sometimes daily. So there are weeks where we've met more than once. And those meetings, Nicole and Lindsay are a standing item for us. And so our principals are not the question was, are they getting guidance? Our principals are making these decisions, working with teachers on the decisions based on very strict guidance, COVID safety guidance that Nicole and Lindsay bring to us every week. They offer themselves to answer our questions. Documentation after documentation goes forward to principals, and then we come back and talk about that. So I guess I don't want it to sound like we're just trying to make everybody happy. We're not, we'd love to, but what we're doing is trying to say what's the most flexibility within the COVID safety guidelines. And we never lose sight of those guidelines.
And I know, Deborah, I know you and your principals, like I said, everybody's invested in making sure everything's being done as safely as possible. But that's why I'm asking these questions, so that we can be reassuring and show people like, yes, we're looking at everything. Related to that, actually, I have a question about, this goes back to the KN95s, Brett, for situations where teachers are supervising lunch in their classroom and they're with students who are now unmasked, again, that would be a situation where I would think KN95s would be appropriate for those staff members to have access to. But your statement, Brett, about the supply of KN95s and making sure we're able to maintain an adequate supply, but you also said that you don't really have any concerns about being able to access those. Frankly, I would support the idea that anyone who wants a KN95 mask should have access to one. If that's what it takes to help people feel safe, then that's an easy solution, frankly. As a classroom teacher, if I have access to a KN95, that increases my confidence level astronomically. So I think that's a simple solution to easing a lot of people's fears, frankly. The other question I have about the variability between campuses, it was said, I believe in Mike's portion, that parents will be surveyed again January 12th, that's tomorrow, and that survey will close the 18th, but these plans are still very much in the making. And as a parent who has to make this decision, and this happened when we had a very similar discussion back in September, as a parent who has to make this decision, I need to know that level of detail about what's happening in my child's school. Is he going to be eating in a classroom where everyone's unmasked? Is he going to be taking PE classes? So how are, like, I love Jennifer's example of every transition is going to happen outside. That's a reassuring thing to hear as a parent. But that's what I need to hear as a parent, is literally that level of detail. What's it look like for my kid's school, so I can make a decision about whether I feel safe sending him or her, depending, but that's middle school, that's a little ways off, to school, transportation, arrival processes. That's the level of detail that a lot of our parents are going to be looking for before they make a decision. And frankly, a lot of our teachers are going to be looking at before they decide whether or not they want to utilize leave options and come back or not. And I do have concerns about staffing. If we have too many teachers choosing to utilize leave, whether or not we're going to have enough teachers available to us to put these plans into place. I think we still have a lot of work to do, frankly, in reassuring our staff and our families that what we're doing is safe. And I am reassured by hearing you are able to answer my questions to an extreme detail. And I appreciate that, because that is reassuring to see. But it's these level of details that families really need to have access to before they make that decision. We're going to ask them to make that decision before they see this information, which is, again, another reason why I advocated not for a January 25th start date. I still feel that's too soon. I feel like we still have a lot of planning to do before we can implement these with confidence and more importantly, have confidence among our families and our staff.
Sorry, Wendy. I
just want to reiterate, I appreciate everybody's work. I know everybody's working so hard to make sure everything is safe and everybody's taken care of. I really do. Frankly, I would like to give our staff more time to get these plans fleshed out so that we can all feel confident in them. So thank you, everybody. And that is the last of my questions.
I just have a few thoughts that I'm going to share, but I'm going to start with what Wendy finished on, just as another parent of elementary school students. I do think there is value to sharing that there is an operational plan. Jennifer, Adley, everyone has said tonight has been reassuring if my students went to your school. And I don't know, we don't need the full spreadsheet for sure. One of my students, I received something on Friday from a principal, and it was just a friendly Friday newsletter saying more information coming. But I think just sometimes communication can provide that confidence, that peace of mind that we're working on this. We're thinking through these details, everything from lunch to recess to drop off, everything. And I know you're doing the work. I mean, nobody here is questioning that the work isn't being done, but maybe providing that reassurance out to the families when they get the survey, just that these details are being thought through. Again, I'm impressed by that you do have, is it 21 or 22 operational plans at a very minute detail. That's amazing that you guys have put that together. But I do hear from Wendy's point of view, as a parent, am I going to be filling out the survey? What is that? What are those safety procedures in the school? Okay, so that was that. My other feedback, I just want to say, I am reassured by this plan, and I appreciate it very much. Since the kindergarten start in mid-November, my concern has been the equity for our remote learners. And I feel that this plan has addressed the flexibility for families and also probably leveraging some staff that need to stay in remote. And I really appreciate all of the work, because in a district our size and trying to do that math and creative matching up is not easy. And I know that we have a great team of principals, and I know a lot of the work has now been delivered to your plates to do these customized plans at the building level. And I honestly think that's how this is going to work, is you know your families, you know your communities, you know your schools. Schools have the nuances of language magnet programs, or they have, you know, high cap classes, or they have, you know, it's a small school, or it's an Anderson that has almost 800 students, and there's nuances that you guys can manage. So I really like that we have adjusted the autonomy at the building level. So I'm very supportive of that. We've evolved in 10 months, and I do think that with the new governor's recommendations, I agree that they could be a little clearer. I do think that we are set to go, and I appreciate the detail to help us feel safer. But I do know that there's a lot of trepidation from our educators. Some don't feel safe. And so I think it's our job just to reiterate what the processes are, enforce, you know, it's not just in our schools, it's in our community. If we want to keep rolling out and opening up more grades, our full community has to be on board and mask up, and we have to reduce transmission. So I'm just going to say I do endorse this reopening plan. The schedule seems tight, but it seems that our principals have control over it. And what makes me feel okay with this is that we've resolved the remote learning inequity. And that we also are letting the individual buildings kind of work through their own nuances. But let's continue, I think, reinforcing the safety and kind of community spirit that we aren't going to continue to move forward if we're not all in this, and reinforce all of the safety measures.
Madam Chair, I've got a question,
Okay.
if I could, sorry.
All right, that's okay. You go, and then if you want to end it, you can end it. If you want to go now, go now.
And I also have something to say.
I wanted to ask Mike and Deborah and our principals. I know that Director Smith identified a lot of operational details that she would be expected as a parent to have access to. I remember some of that information around drop off and lunch and recess being distributed previously to families. Is that correct?
Dr. Webb, we in the late summer, early fall, had put together a plan, a handbook, if you will, that did address many of those safety precautions and guidelines that are an expectation at all of our schools. We also recognized another communication, and we certainly can re-emphasize in our communication that those safety guidelines will continue to be adhered to, and that they may look differently at buildings. But yes, those were in the handbook. I believe that's still available on our website. And
And as I recall, Deborah, as we were scaling our K-pods, some of that information also was distributed at that time by principals to families, correct?
It was, yes.
Okay. So let me ask this question of our principals. is there sufficient time to pivot and communicate to families the information that has been shared previously one more time so that they can make an informed decision about whether or not they want to send their child to in-person or select full remote? Is there enough time to do this?
Our small work group has actually put together some templates for all principal buildings or all buildings to be able to use. So we've done some of that work ahead of time so that we can quickly move on this and pivot and get information out to our families.
Thanks, Bobby.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
So Kamara, do you want to go net first and then I can go after you, or vice versa?
That doesn't matter. You can do closing arguments. It's always the best. I want to say that I kind of understand where I do understand where Wendy's coming from, and to me, and what I was trying to get to was like when we were going through this level of detail was, hey, maybe there has to be more communication or reiterate the exact same communication we've received several times because people have a lot of stuff going on. But I feel like when we start our jobs, and I'm the newest member, so all I do is read these little manuals, is to create policy. Their job is to implement it. And so when we start asking these specific levels of detail, we dilute the credibility of the message that we're sending. Because what we're saying is we don't trust you. You've said that you're doing these things. You said that you're following the guidelines that the governor gave. You said each principal is making these choices. And then we say, well, I want to know what this principal is saying about this. And I want to know how this is working like this. I understand why Wendy's doing it. I love that what she's brought out is exactly what, Dr. Strom is saying. The parents might need more information again, the same information we've already given, because they've been, swamped with all this information before, and it has to come again at the time that it's most important to the issues that we're addressing. So I appreciate that, but I just want to say that I trust the team that's in front of us. I also know that we have a responsibility to pull out certain questions, and we need to redirect our constituents to the fact that they've received this information and it was here, and they're going to be here to make sure this is reinforced. But we're not going to ask unless there's a complaint that something that they've said they're going to do, that's policies, that's met the standards of health. We're not going to just go behind them and watch them do each of these things. We have an expectation that they're professionals and they'll do that. So I have an expectation that everyone on this call is a professional. I hope that if for some reason you can't meet the requirements that we have, you let us know and we find a way to do it. And so I just thank you for the work that was done on this. And I know it's really hard for everybody.
And then I want to kind of pivot just a little bit. And we were, as Director Sproul mentioned at the beginning of all this, the directors and the superintendent have received a lot of emails on both sides of this issue. And two things to note. One is just because all of the people that you interact with have the same feelings and concerns that you do, does not mean that everybody in the community does. We have received an equal number of emails for going back and for not going back, hands down, and equally passionate, equally good in defense, and also equally not good in defense. We've received a lot. I suggest that if you believe that, this is to those people out there that are listening, those 500 people that are out there listening, if you believe that you are speaking for the majority, please reach out to other people that are not in your Facebook group or in your friend group, because there's no majority on this issue. It is directly split down the middle. Piggybacking on that, a lot of the emails in regard to going back to school, wanting to go back to school, had to do with social and emotional health and well-being. And I agree. Our kids are suffering from being part of history, from being part of this pandemic. And going back to school will help that. But I want to make it very clear, it will not fix that. This is bigger. What we are going through as a community and as a country is bigger than kindergarten or first grade or even your senior year in high school. The turmoil and the stress that your children are feeling is not going to go away just because they step in their school building. And your the staff that are going to work with your students are going to work really hard to help heal your kids' hearts. But just be aware that there are so many other things that go into their well-being, and don't expect a miracle, and check in with your kids every single day and open up those discussions, because school is amazing and these people that presented are amazing and the people that work in our buildings are amazing, but they cannot heal everything that currently ails our society. And I just want all those people out there that are listening
Well
to
said. That was well said, Kathy. And it's not the only pandemic that's happening in our country right now. There's kids facing a lot of other issues right now that have nothing to do with the pandemic. And they've been facing them for a long time and they're at the forefront. So I really appreciate your words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. I just want to summarize. I was going to just speak to the fact that we have had two very distinct perspectives communicated towards the board over the last couple weeks, and they're passionate and well thought out and well written, and speaking their own individual truths. And I respect all of those points of view, and I trust, I mean, I know all my other colleagues here have also read the emails that we've received, and there's a lot of there's just a lot of people personally deeply invested in this, and I respect and appreciate your willingness to share your thoughts. I do think that this plan moving forward does respond to many of the concerns presented, because it does provide some accommodation for remote learners, workload on teachers, and hopefully flexibility for teachers that are high risk. There's not going to be a perfect solution, especially in a pandemic. We're not going to have a one size fits all. It's magical. But I will say the fact that we are, thankfully, we have principals willing to step up and take the lead and make a plan right for their school community. I'm very appreciative. So thank you everyone for the hard work. I do want to touch on one thing, Kamara, and I appreciate that you chimed in and said it. And I am going to respectfully disagree just a little bit. I do know and acknowledge that our role is policy. I would challenge that our role as policymakers, reopening schools, that's a policy level decision based on state level policy, CDC guidance, et cetera. And having confidence in the plan sometimes does involve the detailed questions. I don't want to be the ones having to answer it. Our team here has to come up with the answers and do all the heavy lifting and do the work, and I'm so grateful that they do. But I do think sometimes the place for those detailed questions is to give us the confidence to support a policy level decision. Anyways, does anyone else have anything to add? Or
I will add that I agree with that. And I think that the manner could be, these are the questions that our people have. We think that they expect the answers to these questions. So if you could produce something like that, besides going through each of these small decisions, but you're right. And that's what I try to say in the beginning. You're right. We have to, it's our responsibility to make sure that they're answering these detailed level of questions. I agree, because we're here to support that contingency, but I don't think that, well, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
And I would just add it, I don't think that has anything to do with trust. As I ask questions, I trust that there are answers, and they've been, and they have been thought through. So it has nothing to do with my trust in district staff. What it has to do with is the trust of our constituents who have elected us to ask these questions, and that they are trusting us to ensure that these things are happening. So a lot of the things I have questions about, I know that there are answers, but it's that publicly reassuring our community who is watching this that these things have been thought through. And that's why sometimes these questions are being asked, because I understand that they've been thought through, but I want to reassure our community that that accountability is there.
And I think that is exactly our role. I completely, absolutely agree. But when you have 4 principals and they say that these decisions are being made at the principal level and they're thinking about all of these issues, and then you say, well, I want to know exactly what the answers to those questions are right now. I guess we disagree on where those questions should be answered, and where, not the broad questions. Are people want to be safe? Do they have the PPE? Do they have plans for how PE looks, or how that's one thing, but to ask for those exact plans, I think that type of minutia and the way the questions are asked can affect credibility, but we can agree to disagree.
Well, because we are on the 3 hour and 45 mark.
Madam Chair, if I could interrupt, I have a sense of what the general consensus is from the board relative to a go forward plan, but I don't want to misread comments from the board. So I'm going to invite that you poll the board individually to affirm or not this go forward plan. So if you could do that for me, that would be helpful.
Okay. I will poll the directors, and if you want, I mean, for me, I am on board, for instance, Steve, but I would say that I want to make sure that families are getting the communication, and also our teaching staff is getting good communication this week, so everyone's empowered to make the right decision. But Director Banfield, are you on board?
I am on board with following the governor's guidelines.
Director Barrows.
Yes, kind of what you had mentioned, though, I think that level of communication in kind of what the plan is, so parents can make decisions, knowing their child's schedule and how much instructional time they're going to have versus on-demand time, knowing kind of the plans for lunch and different things like that. Just making sure that parents can make informed decisions within the next week or two. I think I do have, there is a lot to pack in before, Monday or Tuesday when kindergartners expand, the following week when 1 and 2 expand, and just making sure teachers feel reassured with safety and making sure that communication on what the safety plan is. I want to make sure that our teachers feel safe.
Director Decker.
I love the building level decision making. I'm hoping that our principals don't feel too overwhelmed. And I've said this before, you guys are amazing. Make sure you have people that can support you during this time. It can be very lonely at the top. Don't try and go alone. I think this is awesome. This is actually what I campaigned on well before the pandemic, was allowing building level administrators to make building level decisions. I think it's great. I just want to caution that we make sure that like has been said before, that our teachers are feeling safe and listened to. That's it.
Director Smith.
Honestly, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think that what I have heard, I support. I think there are still a lot of plans that are still being crafted. I don't know what those are ultimately going to look like because they're still works in progress. What I've heard so far sounds good. And I trust people that as the planning continues, it will be the same caliber of planning and the same level of care and carefulness. I think that like Director Decker, I do support giving every building the flexibility, but I caution that maximum flexibility can often feel like a lack of guidance. And I think there's a careful balance there that we need to make sure we are providing adequate guidance so that people can make plans accordingly. I want to advocate again. I think that we can reassure people by providing additional PPE. I would like to advocate for KN95s for all staff should they choose to have it. I would also advocate for FAB classes to remain remote during the high risk phase. But these are details. I think that all in all, I feel good about what I have heard. I still have a lot of questions about the plans that are still in development. I do not support the timeline, frankly. I think that we're trying to get too much done in too short a time frame.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, just before we adjourn, I just wanted to add one additional thing because I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge our outgoing board chair. I just wanted to express some gratitude for Wendy last year. She served and not only served during a pandemic, but also had the fortune of mentoring 4 very green board members. And so I just appreciate her leadership. We had so many meetings, so many marathon meetings. And I hope she now gets a little bit more time to relax with her family. But I am so grateful for your leadership last year.
I second that. Amazing. You did a great job. I can't even imagine. And I feel so sorry for Kyle. And you've got an amazing temperament for this. And you have put so much of your time and your life into this. I can't even imagine. Now we all can just rue the day that you got off of that because you actually have extra time to make it more difficult. Just joking. I really appreciate all the work that you've done.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, Kyle. I also appreciate the fact that I was not up till midnight last night. My Sunday night email, or 2 nights ago, Sunday nights were my email nights generally. And so I have been there. I know what it's like, and I appreciate you very much, Kyle, taking it over, especially the timing of your taking.
Well, I will say that Wendy and I worked out a transition that I would address all emails starting January 1st. And I swear it was like January 1st and just the email floodgates open. So I do have some email catch up to do. Thank you all very much. Thank you to the staff, the principals, Dr. Webb, Dr. Strom. It was a great conversation. And I feel like it was a really productive conversation. So we are going to recess to executive session with no action to follow. And it should not be longer than 30 minutes.
Kyle, you'll have to announce, Kyle?
Yep.
You'll have to announce the reason for recessing into executive session.
Thank you. I'm still new at this. So
Yes, I know. That's why I'm here.
We will recess to executive session to discuss the performance of a public employee with no action to follow. Okay.